Stand up. Right, can we go? Right, can you turn phones off, please? Right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our full council. Today, a different full council. We have the passing of very popular Councillor Pidcock. And I know people want to say a few words. There was also former Councillor Peter Hutchinson, who was Conservative leader and a member of this council who passed away recently. So let's have the minute's silence for them both, please. Thank you very much. Now then, before I invite one or two people to say one or two words. There's two people at least. I'll go to Councillor Peter Jackson.
Right, thank you. Yeah, I mean, today is a very sad day. You know, there is an empty chair over there, and I think we all feel it very strongly indeed. There's no doubt that Bernard was a very dedicated county councillor. He was a great champion of his community, but he I think his passion and character came through in everything that he did. And from the county council point of view, he was always, for every minute he was here, deeply involved in all of the county council's processes, representing his community, but the whole of Northumberland as well. What he had, and I can say this as a councillor from another group, is that even though we didn't obviously agree on everything, or possibly anything really, but even though we didn't agree, he had that ability to transcend all of the political groups. And to one extent or another, I think that each one of the 67 of us actually had him as a friend of ours, and we would always have a word with him every single time we saw him in the corridor. And not just ourselves as the 67 councillors, but I know his loss is felt deeply by all of the staff, because they all had a great respect for his passion and drive as well. So I think, on behalf of the whole council, I can say that we all will miss him terribly, and there is an emptiness in this chamber today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dungworth? The microphone's coming.
Thank you. I just want to say a few words on behalf of the Labour group. Bernard Pidcock was my political and personal friend. Him and I were the class of 1995. We got elected together onto Blythe Valley Council, and we've won elections together and we lost elections together. And this is actually the first time I've stood as a councillor in a chamber without Bernard at my side. I think it's fair to say there's probably not a person in this room who Bernard hasn't driven to distraction at some time or other. However, he was the epitome of what a good councillor should be. He was passionate, he was committed, he was hardworking. He was as happy on the streets of his ward or on the streets of other people's wards as he was in this council chamber. Lots of tributes have been paid to Bernard from within the council, officers and members, which I think is a testament to him as an individual, not just as a politician. But we've also been inundated by people in the local community who've come to us to tell us stories of how Bernard quite literally improved or changed their lives. And I think, you know, we can all learn something from Bernard's way of being a councillor. He was an unabashed socialist, as everybody will know. But what's important is he lived every bit of his life as one. It wasn't something he just wore as a badge. Bernard was socialism, and he did so with a ready smile and a mischievous sense of humour that we've all been the butt of. And I think we are all the poorer for not having him with us. Thank you.
All right. I used to have good banter with Bernard. I remember in a car, and I said, "Why do you hate the Tories so much?" And he said, "I don't." He says, "I've never met one." And you know, me and him, as I say, it was good banter. All the get well cards I sent him when he had his hip and knee or whatever he had done. And he used to always send me a Winter Festival Christmas card. So his sense of humour, however he got hot up, there was always a tinkle in his eye that sort of had a bit of mischief. And I think we'll all miss him. We'll all miss the character. And I hope, you know, we can move on with great memories of Bernard Pidcock. Can't see anybody else. I'll move on. Right. We have no public questions. Apologies for absence. Karen? Any from the floor? Okay, think is that. Right, minutes of the meeting, pages 7 to 32. Is there anything in there for the record? Councillor Hill. And then Councillor Sesford.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick clarification on page 15, when it mentions that I was disappointed that members were being asked to vote on this today. That was the council tax support scheme changes, and members had not known about it. The point was members were aware that this decision had been made by the Cabinet, but what concerned me is that it hadn't been an item of business to transact specified on the agenda, which I have had conversations with officers, and I think it's been accepted that this is something that should be avoided in future. But the point of clarification was it was about it not being specified on the agenda.
Noted. Councillor Sesford. Microphone's coming.
Yeah, just to say, on the minutes it has me down as being present, and apologies. Just to confirm as a matter of correctness, I wasn't actually at the last meeting.
Noted. Councillor Davey.
Yes, Chair. Well, I'd like to move the minutes actually and bring to your attention page 14, the third paragraph down, where we were attacked by Councillor Oliver, and I've named him, so I'm sure you want to speak to this, for the 50% cut in council tax benefit. I'd just like to note that the minutes that have just been moved and seconded show that it was all within your time period, Councillor Oliver.
This is all these minutes correct?
6 months after you took over the council was when that 50% was moved through your team and not ours. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, Councillor Grimshaw.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to go down the page on page 14 in the second paragraph to the bottom, and it was just that, you know, I did ask for a response of Councillor Oliver that with the 500 people who had responded with regards to the council tax, and we just wanted a breakdown of those who had been involved with that were vulnerability, and that indeed were in that bracket, because we haven't received a breakdown of who they are, and I did ask for that. And plus, again, I just urge them to please reconsider this absolute horrendous tax.
Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Councillor Grimshaw. Apologies for not responding directly to you, but I do know, and I have seen the response of an FOI request that your group has put forward. So you may not be personally aware of this, but certainly members within your group are aware that we can't give that information because it was an anonymised response. So it's not possible to break it down in the way that you asked.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. Page 24.
Yep.
It's a motion that got passed through council last time. The thing about the last few lines say that the report on the progress on the issue will be included on all full council agendas. I don't see it on this agenda at all. So could I have some explanation of why you're defying the will of the council?
I don't follow what you...
Is whether or not the progress in relation to the motion. I think the letter has been issued, but I'm not quite absolutely certain.
The letter has been issued, is what I'm being told.
Sorry, Chairman, the issued letter, the issued letter has been circulated through some.
The issue letter has been circulated.
Point of clarification, that's not what I said. It says a report on the progress on the issue will be included on all full council agendas. It's not on the agenda. The minute, you cannot count the minute as an item on the agenda, as in after you've gone through the minutes, there should be somewhere on the agenda that reports back to what is happening, even if it's nothing.
Well, I'm sure the letter, I've seen the letter. It's here.
Chairman, short of actually saying on the agenda that the letter, which was circulated with the summons, has been issued, I'm not sure what else officers could have done, Councillor Reid.
Right, it's not a debate on this, but...
No, sorry, it's just one... What it says is there will be an item on every agenda that tells you what has happened, even if that is nothing. The council told you to put this item on the agenda every time, and you haven't.
I'll note that, Councillor Reid, and even if we have to put nothing on, we'll put nothing on your agenda.
Thank you.
Councillor Grimshaw again.
Thank you. Well, let's come back to Grant's non-response of Councillor Oliver, because we have said and we have got evidence that, in fact, when you were on about we were going to place a horrendous amount on the tax, it wasn't so. It was within your remit, and you haven't said yea or nay. I would like a response, please.
Right. We are just approving the minutes. No, correct. I'll move on.
I'm quite happy to give a response. So when we became the administration, we were given a copy of a proposed set of savings applying to the whole sort of council programme. And in that, there was a line that showed £5 million, and there was a report that talked about a 50% cut that had been prepared before the election in May 17. The timetable for that proposal was to have a consultation period in June and July 2017, given that the election was only in May, I think May the 4th, and the council was only officially formed on something like May the 23rd. It certainly wasn't something that happened during the lifespan of our administration. There was a plan to go to Cabinet in October 2017, and to full council in November of 2017. I'm perfectly happy to share with you that information, that spreadsheet, if you'd like to come and see me afterwards.
Right, I'm not taking any more on this, closing this and moving on. It's a correction of the minutes.
Sorry, it's just a response because...
No, sorry. Right. Disclosure of members' interests. Disclosure, yes. Councillor Castle.
Yes. In the event there's any discussion about the loan to the Annick Youth Hostel, which is covered in the OSC scrutiny minutes, I will need to declare a personal and prejudicial interest.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. After advice, I'm going to declare a personal but non-pecuniary interest in agenda item 9 and by association 10, but I still intend to vote on both issues.
Okay. Any other declarations of interest? I see nobody. For announcements, I have none. Correspondence, I draw attention to the Grayling letter that has gone out. I believe that the strike by Northern Rail is now over. So let's see what progress we make on that one. Questions? Or two questions. Councillor Hill.
Thank you. First question, what is the total amount, including the cost breakdown, that NCC incurred in the calendar year of 2018 on membership fees and other associated costs through membership of national and regional bodies, including NULC, NERIO, the LGA, and any other organisations which offer advice, information, training and similar membership services to local authorities?
Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. We spend £462,000 a year across 80 organisations on subscriptions and memberships, ranging from £45 to £60,224. It's a long list, and many of these subscriptions are legal requirements or offer additional benefits, for example, sort of procurement savings and shared procurement services. The three you mentioned, I understand that we spend nothing on NALC. I wasn't quite sure whether you meant the National Association of Local Councils or Northumberland Association of Local Councils, but I think in both cases it's nothing. NERIO, we spend £31,824, but we used significant benefits from their recruitment portal that would save us quite a lot more than that in recruitment advertising costs. And the LGA, we spend £60,224, and I think the benefit of that is significant in terms of advice, benchmarking and other similar services.
Supplementary.
Thank you. This question and my next one are in the light of what the administration have said about looking at all areas for cost saving. Given the concerns about the quality of advice provided by these bodies, as Herefordshire Council found out, concerns about impartiality, many of these bodies act like yet another union for officers. Given the peer reviews, which tend to be mutual backslapping, the complete absence of anyone in these bodies that's genuinely interested in issues and the problems in local government and the need for reform. And in terms specifically of value for money, we all get these glossy magazines, which I don't think any of us can either be bothered to take the cellophane off, never mind read. Can you honestly be confident that this can't be looked at again and we're giving taxpayers value for money?
Councillor Oliver.
It's a long list of 80 organisations, so I can't be totally confident that every single one of those 80 organisations is giving us great value for money. So certainly I'd be happy to look at that with the Finance Department. In terms of your comments about Herefordshire, I can't speak to issues that another organisation has had. We certainly, I don't think, organisations like NERIO, I don't think we particularly use for advice. We're simply using the recruitment portal, but I do know we've had some very good advice from the LGA. So I think each one will be an individual case. We're happy to have a look at the total list and see if there is anything there that we don't need to be spending, but I can't really answer the other specific queries. Thank you.
Councillor Hill, question 2.
Thank you. Since the 1st of May 2017, how much money has been spent by this authority on staff compromise agreements, often dubbed gagging agreements? What was the total amount spent by this authority on these agreements between May the 1st, 2013 and May the 1st, 2017?
The amount that has been spent since the beginning of May 2017 on non-disclosure sort of contract termination agreements is £1,135,518. The amount spent during the period from May 13 to May 17, I haven't actually added it up, but it's a very, very similar figure. It's just 1.1 million, within a few hundred quid, I think. A couple of points I'd make. I mean, first of all, the contract termination agreements or compromise agreements are not, I think there's a difference between them and a gagging agreement. There's been a lot of press. I noticed it was on the Sunday Politics programme this week of North East Sunday Politics, and I think Sunderland had spent 16 million on NDAs. and 35 million has been spent across the North East. So that would suggest that Northumberland is down towards the bottom of the table. But I think it's really important. The agreements that this authority enters into do often include a non-disclosure clause, but they're not non-disclosure agreements, they're compromise agreements. And often there is a need to deal with an employee of the council in a sort of equitable, quick and fair way for both sides. And sometimes that means reaching a compromise. Sometimes if there's a need for somebody to move on, it needs to be dealt with quickly. So for example, this is not a specific example, I'm just making it up, but if it were a poorly performing head teacher that was resulting in that school getting poor education results, then there would be a good reason to spend money on reaching a quick agreement and getting it dealt with firmly and quickly in the best interest of the people using that service.
Supplementary?
Thank you. Do you agree that these payments, often six-figure amounts, add greatly to public cynicism? And this is a problem across local government. And the members of the public are concerned that the volume, the amount of the money paid out, and also the gagging nature which both blocks information and justice to others. Final point, would you agree that if an officer has left another authority and been given a six-figure payout, and then they join this authority and get another six-figure payout, members of the public would quite rightly say, have you not done your research?
Councillor Oliver?
I can't comment on any specific cases. I think the principle is that people should be asking questions about things like this. So if a big payment is made, it will always be declared in the council's accounts. And I think we as an administration would welcome such scrutiny. I think it needs to be looked at on a case-by-case example. In some cases, it will be justified and the best thing to do. I would hope that this administration, it's not something we do lightly, but if it's necessary, then it will be necessary. And I think there are times when that's really important.
Okay, item 7, receive the minutes. Good to get questions over quickly, wasn't it? Receive the minutes of Cabinet meeting held on the 15th of January. Councillor Jackson, page 33 to 38.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just happy to propose the minutes of that Cabinet meeting. I'd just like to take people's attention to page 36, where our capital programme investments, the most recent ones, are highlighted. At Wentworth Leisure Centre in Hexham, we're actually making a real start to our campaign to refurbish leisure centres up and down Northumberland, and this is just the very first one, and we're hoping that it'll be an example of many to come. The Parks Enhancement Programme is just a symbol of how strongly we feel that we should maintain the parks so that people can use them for proper recreation in our towns and feel proud of them. We have more green flags than ever, green flag awards than ever in our county, and we want to build on that because we know that communities are really proud of their parks and we're going to invest in them. Thank you.
Okay. Can't see anybody. Item 8. Consider the minutes of the following committees. Item 1, Corporate Services and Economic Growth, pages 39 to 48. Councillor Bourne.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to move the minutes of the dated the Monday the 17th of December 2018 on page 39 and on Monday the 4th of February 2019, which was also a meeting of the look at this budget, was also a meeting of all of the members of scrutiny, not just that committee. So there was a joint meeting, but I chaired it.
Anything for Councillor Bourne? I see no one. 3, Health and Wellbeing Overview and Scrutiny, pages 61 to 82. Councillor... I thought you'd taken them both together. Oh, sorry, no. Go back to 2. Page 49 to 60. Sorry you were late, Councillor Thompson.
That's right. I hereby present the minutes of the Family and Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee, pages 49 to 60.
Anything on there? Can't see anybody. Now we'll go to Health and Wellbeing Overview and Scrutiny. Councillor Watson, pages 61 to 82.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to present the two meetings, one held on the 8th of January and the other one held on the 23rd of January. Nothing much to say except on the 23rd of January, it's a very full and complete meeting with over 20 questions put by members of the group, and I present these as draft minutes today.
Draft minutes. Councillor Bridget.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to raise two questions in relation to the item regarding Rothbury Hospital, which is pages 70 to 80 in the report. In doing so, can I first thank members of the committee for their contributions during that scrutiny session, but I've been asked to specifically highlight the contributions of Councillors Dungworth and Moore at the meeting with regards to their due diligence that they carried out in terms of asking questions regarding the facts put in front of them, which clearly had the CCG on their toes. But I would like to, the two questions I would like to raise, and what became apparent from the meeting, is the impact, although I've heard many times that the impact in closing Rothbury Hospital doesn't affect this authority. It hasn't got really anything to do with us. Well, what is becoming apparent is it actually does, and it's starting to affect us financially. So my question is in relation to the closure of the hospital and the impact that it's clearly having now on the increase in home care packages and referrals to nursing care as well, but not just that, any potential impact on public transport, and what became apparent over the recent bad weather that we had, impact on highways and the fire service, where they actually had to divert resources to pick up 2 palliative care nurses that had got stuck. Should an independent report, and will an independent report be carried out by the Scrutiny Committee to look into the actual cost of this closure on Northumberland County Council and how it is impacting and affecting us? And the other question I have, I did raise in the meeting that where Rothbury Hospital closure was the substantive issue or the only issue on the agenda, would it be possible to hold those scrutiny meetings actually in Rothbury? We've done it with other meetings, and I know the Cabinet have been to visit other places of Northumberland as well. So would it be possible to also do that where it is the substantive issue or the only issue on the agenda?
Well, I don't know if Councillor Watson wants to come in, but I think it's quite a long answer you're going to get if you get one, which could be written.
Just to answer the second question, which is about holding things in Rothbury. I can report that a number of the committee members are attending a meeting in Rothbury in the near future, and I can also, by personal knowledge, know that the NHS are also having meetings in Rothbury, again with the people in that area. It is not the normal practice of a scrutiny committee to meet outside of these premises, and that's what we did in this case. The first question that was asked, I have no knowledge of, and it's not something I can make any comments about whatsoever.
We'll get that written answer. Councillor Dickinson.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick note to thank Councillor Watson and his committee for continuing to keep an eye on the Hadston, Amble and Rothbury dental practice issue. It is nice to see that the tender is out, although it is a bit delayed. I'm a little bit concerned about the wording of some of that in terms of the ability to potentially service Hadston and other areas from Amble. Amble in its own right has pressures that need to be dealt with. Hadston has its own right pressures around poverty, transport and other issues, and the health impact on families in that area. So really it was just to thank the committee for continuing to look at it, but also to draw their attention to it again in terms of the tender and to keep the pressure on. I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Okay. Yes?
Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. That's very good of you. Just to say that at that meeting, we were very concerned about the length of time that this process was taking. We did go into quite depth as to why it was taking that length of time, and they really explained the whole thing to us. And whereas I'm still not very happy about it. We have to accept that as the case, and I will make sure that the Amble situation is into consideration. Thank you very much.
Okay, no one else has indicated. We'll go to the Health and Wellbeing Board, chaired by myself. Pages 83 to 96. Anybody? Can I say anything? Okay. Audit Committee, item 5, pages 97 to 104. Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Chair. Happy to move the minutes of the Audit Committee meeting held on Wednesday, the 23rd of January, as set out on pages 97 to 104.
No one's indicating. We can take them. Thank you. Let's move on to item 9, report of the Executive Director of Adult Social Care and Children's Services. Charges for care and support services for adults. Councillor Jones.
Thank you. This report is put before you to agree recommendations on changes to the Council's charging policy for adult care and support services. I don't think any of us would be welcoming these changes, but in the overall financial context set out in the budget report later on this agenda, I believe that they are necessary. They are quite complex, and I propose to go through the recommendations. The recommendations are split into 3 groups. The first 3 ask the Council to consider the background information relevant to the detailed changes to the charging policy that are being proposed. The next 6 recommendations are the proposed changes themselves, and the final 4 recommendations ask the Council to confirm existing elements of its charging policy and to adopt the formal statement of the policy attached to the report as Appendix 6. In relation to recommendation 1, a full consultation exercise was undertaken from the 22nd of October to the 21st of December. Every service user or their representative who may have been affected by the proposals was written to, and the consultation was made available on the Council's website. Appendix A to this report has a comprehensive summary of the responses to that consultation. Members will have been able to read this and will take these comments into account in considering the recommended changes to the policy, some of which have been modified from the original proposals to take account of points made by the consultees. Recommendation 2 asks the Council also to consider the Equality Impact Assessment in relation to this proposal, which is attached as Appendix B. I want to be clear that the equality analysis does identify that this proposal would have an adverse impact on older people and people with a disability. The Council needs to consider whether or not acceptance of the proposed policy changes is reasonable and proportionate given the overall objectives of the Council and the financial and policy context in which it is operating. I believe that it is. Recommendation 3 asks that in making its decision, the Council is aware of the detailed advice by officers provided within this report, including information about the statutory guidance which the Council is required to follow. The recommendations, the next group. The recommendation 4 asks the Council to consider reducing to £35 the standard allowance for disability-related costs for people getting the highest rates of the main non-means tested disability benefits. This in principle brings the higher rates of disability living allowance, attendance allowance and personal independent payments into account for charging purposes. This has not been the case previously. The logic behind this change is set out in the report, but in overview it is felt to be reasonable as these benefits are paid to help people to meet the cost of managing their care needs. Individuals can ask for a separate assessment of their disability-related expenditure if they feel that their personal situation means they incur more costs than the amounts that are assumed within the charging policy. I do want to stress that. Since this recommendation was agreed by Cabinet, further information has come to light, though, following officers' assessment of the implication of a government announcement about the national rules on social care charges. National regulations set out minimum incomes which different groups of service users must be left with after paying charges. The government has decided to freeze those figures this year, which in effect means that for people whose income comes from social security benefits, all of the additional income they receive when these benefits are increased for inflation would be assumed to be available to pay for social care charges. The effect of this national decision is that if the Council adopted the recommendations as it stands in the report, some service users, particularly some older people, would see a larger increase in their charges this year than we expected. This is a larger increase to make at once, and I would like to ask the Council to modify the recommendation to phase in the increase over 2 years. I propose that the standard allowance be reduced to £40 from April 2019 and then to £35 from April 2020. This would reduce the increase in charges from April 2019 for the worst affected group of older people from £21.15 per week to £16.15 per week, and would also reduce the immediate increase for all other service users receiving high rate disability benefits. There would be a one-off loss of income to the Council in 2019 to 20, but this would be balanced by the additional income brought in as a result of the government's freezing of the minimum income guarantee, which hasn't been budgeted for, so there would be no overall impact on the Council's budget, which will follow. Recommendation 5 is that the Council agree to adopt the minimum income figures for members of a couple set out in national regulations, but keep in the additional charge for working age adults at a figure calculated on the same basis of the figure of £19.45 quoted in the consultation document. This would be adjusted as necessary for changes in the nationally prescribed minimum income figures. As the report explains, this recommendation corrects an anomaly, which means that someone in a couple who's been asked to pay much less than a single person getting exactly the same social security benefits. There's a complicated history to how this anomaly rose, but making this change would bring Northumberland into line with what we understand is normal practice in most other local authorities. Recommendation 6 is to remove the subsidy for the more rural parts of Northumberland for people who can afford to pay the full cost of their home care. It will have little or no effect on service users with low incomes, since their charges are usually based on what they can afford to pay, which is less than the cost of the services, however that is calculated. It would mostly affect people who have savings of more than £23,250. At present, wherever they live, people who can afford to pay the full cost are charged at the rate that it costs to provide home care in the lowest cost area of Northumberland, which is the urban southeast of the county. The recommendation is that people in rural Northumberland who can afford to pay the actual cost of their services should now be asked to do so. Our proposal does set a limit to that, though. In some of the least populated parts of Northumberland, such as the National Park or the North Pennines, providing home care can be as much more expensive than in most of the rest of rural Northumberland. We propose to continue protecting people in those areas, so people in Otterburn or in Kielder will have to pay no more than they would have to if they lived in Hexham or in Alnwick. Recommendation 7 is that in principle all social care day services should from the 1st of October 2019 be charged for on the basis of their full cost, up to the limit of what each person is assessed as being able to afford to pay. This is about removing some inconsistencies in the current policy, under which most people who can afford to pay already pay the full cost of day services, but for historical reasons, a few services have been exceptions. The main impact of this recommendation will be on users of services by one organisation, Blythe Star. This organisation provides a number of day services which are currently not chargeable but are very similar to others operated by different organisations which are charged for. However, it also provides some highly regarded services for people in unstable mental health, and we need to make sure that the introduction of charges does not risk undermining those services. The delay till October in introducing charges for this organisation's services will enable officers to work with Blythe Star to unpick the different elements of the services which they offer, and to ensure that charges are only applied to the kinds of service which users are already paying charges for elsewhere in Northumberland. Recommendation 8 is to end the discount currently offered to service users who pay by direct debit, and to reduce in its place an introductory offer for new charge payers who agree to pay by direct debit with a discount of £10 on their first 3 bills. The last recommendation for a change in the Council's policy is to introduce a weekly administration fee for people who choose to ask the Council to arrange services for them when they have savings of more than the capital limit, again currently £23,250, and would be able to make their own private arrangements. The power to introduce the fee in these circumstances was introduced by the Care Act. The charge reflects the actual administrative costs, not the cost of services, and also not the cost of care assessments or advice and guidance, which will continue to be available without charge. The next three recommendations ask the Council to confirm that it will continue with its current policy on some other aspects of charging policy which statutory guidance requires the Council to consider. Recommendation 10 is to confirm that all income above the minimum amounts provided for in regulations will continue to be treated as available to pay charges, other than where there are specific exceptions to the Council's policy. Recommendation 11 is for the Council to confirm that it will continue to be no maximum weekly charge and social care service can be charged up to the full cost of their service. This is no change from the position that has been in place since 2014. Recommendation 12 is to confirm, after considering the advice from the Care Act statutory guidance quoted in section 9 of this report and the reasoning set out in that section, that carers should continue to be charged on the same basis as disabled people for any services provided direct to meet their needs. And the final recommendation asks the Council to adopt the charging policy attached as Appendix C, subject to the recommended amendment in relation to phasing in the disability-related expenditure change mentioned earlier to take effect from the 8th of April 2019. And I would like to incorporate in this proposal the amendment, which I think you've all received, which are the amendments to the recommendations to replace recommendation 4 with the following: to reduce the standard allowance for disability-related costs for people getting the highest rates of the main non-means tested disability benefits to £40 per week from April 2019 and £35 per week from April 2020. And in the annex to Appendix 3, the charging policy, under the heading Standard Allowances, to replace the figure £35 with the following: £40 from the 8th of April 2019 to the 5th of April 2020 and £35 thereafter. Thank you.
Right.
I need a seconder.
You have a seconder for that? Yeah, seconded. Councillor Swinburne. Right. There's 13 recommendations and the amendment. It's a very complex motion and outcome here. I've got Councillor Dunworth who wants to speak. Councillor Grimshaw, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to get bogged down in what is, yes, a very detailed report. I want us to focus on who it is we're talking about here, and what we're talking about, again, is very, very vulnerable people within our communities. What I would like to do is I would like to read out, and I must thank you for including the consultation responses in this report, which wasn't in the council tax support one. But I'd like to just read a few things that people have said to make us remember who it is we're talking about here. Your letters put the fear of God into me. I don't know how we'd afford these huge increases after just having a £16 plus increase a week a few months ago. I've sat and cried and lost a lot of sleep with worry since your letter over how we will manage to heat the house and eat if you force us to pay this money. If you implement your proposals, you would find a huge number of users would stop using these services. People cannot afford your payment charges. You would no longer need to provide a care service. Health and well-being of the old and disabled decline will impact on greater costs to the NHS, which we're already seeing. My mother was showed she would need to claim attendance allowance. She could not fill in the forms as she was not mentally capable. Now you're thinking of charging more or even making more savings, so why bother in the first place? An increase of £13.30 a week is a very high percentage increase for people who are on limited income, with no means of increasing it apart from the small amount the government deigns to give them. Just bear with me a second. It is horrible that you should even consider reducing the income of those that are struggling already. Does the spouse of a disabled person not already suffer enough? And in terms of removing the discount for direct debit, if you end the discount, I will cancel my direct debit and pay when the bill comes through. And finally, between them, the respondents identified impacts on a range of protected groups. Women born in the 1950s who've already had to wait an extra 6 years for state pension and are not eligible for benefits, the WASPI women. Lone female householders, the disabled, people with learning difficulties, people on long-term sick, the mentally ill, the elderly, the disabled. So whilst, and finally, if the council is intent on cutting expenditure, I doubt whether my comments will have any sway or impact, and the paper exercise is bound for the shredder anyway. And I think that would be my point, that obviously lots of people said as well how confusing and how complicated the consultation document was for them to fill in, bearing in mind who we're dealing with. There is no way, you might have done an equality impact assessment, but there's no getting away from it. The people who are impacted more are in those protected groups. They have to be by the very nature of those people who we are providing care for. People will choose, will vote with their feet. Somebody talked about heating a house or paying for care charges. People will not take the care ultimately, and we will end up with more people requiring more intensive intervention. We will end up with day centres closing because of the lack of people using them, so it's a cut to the day centres by stealth. I see no losers, no winners in this process whatsoever. And it is like the proposals that have already gone through this council in terms of reducing the council tax support. We are attacking the most vulnerable in this community, people who are already struggling. And I would urge everybody in this chamber, I'm aware I'm probably wasting my breath on the administration because obviously it's part of their budget, but those independents, those Lib Dems, to think about some of the people who have filled these forms in, think about the people who receive this care and turn this proposal down. This council can find the money. It's talking about all the ways it can find money other ways through the keeping the rate support. Actually, let's look at using some of that money for the priorities that this administration in its manifesto, when it talked about a council for everybody, was supposed to be working for. I see nothing in this document that is about working for the whole county.
Shall I take some more? Do you want to answer? Shall I take some more questions? Yeah. Councillor Grimshaw and Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. I wholeheartedly support my colleague, Councillor Dungworth, on this. When I was reading these comments, I was in tears. I couldn't believe the people who had responded and how you can sit up there with heavy hearts and read this and still want to introduce these is absolutely disgraceful. I remember sitting in one meeting quite a number of years ago when we're trying to introduce some of these charges, and there was an elderly gentleman who had his son had some of these. We're going to have some of these charges impact on him, and the fact that the elderly gentleman had very little to live on, and he was sitting there in tears, crying because he didn't know what to do because his son was both physically and mentally disabled, and bless him, and in a wheelchair, and the father was crying to say, "I can't afford to pay these charges. What happens next? Your responsibility. I'll have to put him in a care home." And I would just like to know how much the charges are going to be, is against putting people in care homes who people, elderly parents, etc., can't help, or even wives, husbands who has to care for these people. What kind of position, not only physically but mentally as well, under the pressure you're putting them under, and how much will they actually charge? Have you costed it out to see how much it's actually going to cost to put some of these people into care homes? Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank Councillor Jones for a very clear laying out of what the administration are proposing. It is a very complicated and a very detailed report. But, you know, it's nothing new. We've all been here before. My administration had to do it, and there was all hell to pay. You know, I remember the current administration managed to whip up so much disgust against this report. There was loads of people outside waving banners saying how the Liberal Democrats were going to make them homeless, and people were going to go into care, and there was all this stuff going on because actually people didn't understand the nature of the report. You need to read what it says. This is the only way we're going to be able to continue to deliver the service to the most vulnerable people in Northumberland. There isn't any other way of doing this. And, you know, they cannot help. We are in this situation because our population is growing older. There's more old people alive now than there's ever been before. And there's some really very, very difficult decisions to make. I know I've had to make them, and I've had to stand up there and take it from you lot about how dreadful I was being and how the world would come to an end. Actually, what happens is, in action, this is a lot less worse than you think it's going to be. When you show letters to old and vulnerable people who don't understand the policy behind it, of course they're going to panic. I panic. I get letters from people, you know, I get bills saying, how the hell am I going to pay this? But once you sit down and you read it and you know how you're going to cope with it, it isn't as bad. Now, I'm not saying that this emotionally, this is not going to impact on people, because it's going to, but you've just got to work it through. I can't see that there's anything else we can do other than this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carty.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points here. These cuts are dreadful. It's going to have a massive impact on the community. Food banks, everything will increase. Only this week, I've been inundated at the community centre I work in with people requesting food parcels. One of them from a diabetic. For the next month, he's got £135 to live on for a month, and he's a diabetic. Right? People who are going to be in this situation where they're going to have to pay more for their care are going to now heavily rely on more on food banks. Now, the other thing is, on Friday last week, there were 17 food banks delivered on Friday alone, right? And going back to the ageing population, right? The age of people isn't going up anymore. It's stabilised, if not reduced. People are dying earlier than what they were because of poverty. And this is going to add to it. You really need to think carefully about this. There's lots of papers out there that's telling you about the age limit stabilising and reducing. People are dying earlier, not later. Thank you, Chair.
Right, I've got nobody else indicate. Yeah, Councillor Robinson. Did you screw?
Thank you, Chair. I've got a specific question about 12, but can I just say, I understand the need to balance the budget. Believe me, after 30 odd years of running my own businesses, I understand that. However, sometimes when you micromanage the budgets, which your cabinet members do on a weekly or monthly basis, you lose sight of the bigger picture. And this isn't the way to balance this budget. But can I just draw your attention to number 12, that carers should continue to be charged, as it should not be for, on the same basis. As it reads, you're charging carers.
I'll answer that one specifically. Is that not? For a start, it's to continue, so there's no change to the policy. Can you just check? It wasn't a mistake, was it? That's correct. The charge, yeah. It's when we charge carers for the services that we provide to them for their specific needs. Yeah, so it's not a charge. It's not a payment to carers. It's where carers have separate needs that we provide through social care that they are charged for. And all that recommendation is that we're not going to change that. So we're not proposing to charge more, and in this current situation, we're not proposing to charge less. Yeah?
Okay, I've got Councillor Dickinson. Sorry, I didn't see you before. No, sure.
I was explaining to the combined authority that we usually just shout at each other, but there we go. So this is the wrong thing to do, Chair. It doesn't matter how you dress it up. It doesn't matter if you try and attempt to justify it to yourself that people didn't understand what they were filling in, that people don't understand the responses that we're making. It's simply the wrong thing to do. Other people have commented about things that they may have done previously, that other administrations have done as well, but these are people who are now at breaking point. We are not the only people asking more of them. We know that austerity has meant that benefits have not kept up with the additional charges people are being asked for, not only by this authority, but by gas, electric, and all the other things that people have to pay. This is about levying a small amount of money on the most vulnerable people and not taking into account these personal situations. And if we just take a look at some of the responses that were mentioned earlier, and I too am grateful for seeing them in the paperwork. These are organisations that represent people. These are organisations that understand the system inside out. These are organisations that have supported people, in some cases listed in here for 19 years. I think these people know the circumstances of the people accessing these packages. And I would just urge members in here today to think about the people who they're going to vote potentially against or for, and actually reconsider and make sure that this proposal does not get passed and the administration can think about it again, because there is an opportunity. This doesn't need to be done today. You can look at it again. You can take into consideration more people's comments, different areas that are going to be impacted, the rural communities, for instance. And I just want to make that plea.
Okay, Councillor Jackson.
Right, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, we have had quite a number of scare stories today, and I'm personally upset. I'm personally upset that there are councillors within this chamber who are actually trying to worry vulnerable people, very people that they're trying to represent. And the point is, and if you'd attended the scrutiny committee where this was discussed in detail, you would have been told that absolutely no one within our community, right across Northumberland, who can't afford to pay these charges will be forced to pay. If you haven't got the means to pay them, you will not pay them, and that's a directive that we're giving to officers, and officers are there to help in each individual case. Secondly, each individual person or family who are involved actually have to agree with council officers what the level of package and what the level of support is. So to make great generalisations and really worry people who shouldn't be worried is an abdication of responsibility, in my view. We are taking the responsible approach. We've got an ageing population, and that's been said, and we have to make sure that we've got proper provision in place for that ageing population. The facts are that the percentage of older people in our community right across Northumberland is rising. It doesn't matter how you dress it up, that's what the facts are. And we've actually got a really successful social care system. We've got one of the best social care systems and packages of support of anywhere in the country. And we're trying to make sure that that system is here for the future and it's here for future generations, and it's got a sustainable future. If we don't do this on an incremental basis, which is the way the council's been treating it over a number of years, then that system of support will collapse and it just won't be there for the people right across our county who need these essential services. Somehow, as a county council, we have to find the financial resources to pay that. So we're not doing it for the reasons of you know, as has been trying to claim, to sort of try and take money off people who can't afford it. That's just a lie. We're actually doing it so we've got a sustainable system to provide those essential services that those vulnerable people need. And it's those vulnerable people we're doing this for. So thank you for that.
Councillor Jones, do you want to?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Thank you.
She's already spoke. Hang on, Councillor Jones. Anything new?
Yes,
Chair.
It's just that you get no one to look after the vulnerable people. We are already
Right. Okay, I've heard enough. Councillor Jones. Councillor Jones.
Let's finish.
Am I? Let's just have some order. You've had a number of chances to speak. Councillor Jones.
I think you've made your point. I'd like to thank Councillor Reid, who actually took the trouble to read the document, so thank you very much. And rather than just quoting from the consultation, I'm really grateful for that. First of all, you say Northumberland has they just referred it, we have a significant budget gap, and it would be difficult to make savings at the levels required without considering some reductions in spending, and it isn't one that I particularly wanted to do, to be honest. Instead of considering complaining about what we are doing to make the savings, perhaps you'd quite like to look at why we're making those savings and take the responsibility yourselves. Our focus is on continuing to provide the best services we can to the Northumberland residents, and we're working very hard to minimise the impact of the savings we have to make. We've done all we can to make sure the burden of increased charges does not fall more heavily on anyone than we think they can afford. Anyone who believes that they can't afford to pay will be able to ask us to review their circumstances to make sure their charge is at a level which they can reasonably manage. Right? We've talked a lot about the vulnerable, and I'm not sure when you talk about vulnerable, well, I suppose the whole package, vulnerable are people who are on low incomes, and there's people on disability. Right? Only people who, this will only, they'll have very little effect on service users on low income. Right? That's got to be made clear. It will have very effect. Impacts such as the rurality charge will only affect people who pay for their care. Right? I take the point that Councillor Dunworth made about people being frightened when they received the letter, and I know you did ask this in the scrutiny committee, that we did put a lot in place to make sure that care managers, that carers were well aware of what the changes would mean, and to make sure people understood that they could ring, or somebody could ring for them, the helpline, and get an immediate response to what it would mean to them. Right? We put the extra telephone people there, and that was all put in place. I take your point about direct debits, and we'll just have to see how that goes. But to be honest, these days people pay a lot by direct debit, and I'm not sure it will make a lot of people change, but it may. Right? What I wanted to say was particularly that I want to stress again that we'll never ask people to pay more for their care than it's costing the council. I'll stress that if somebody tells us they can't reasonably afford to pay the amount we've calculated, we'll talk to them about it, and if we agree they can't afford to pay the charges, we will not ask them for it. The disability related, it's a standard allowance that we make because people aren't madly keen on doing a full assessment. People on high level disability for care, they receive the amount of care just to provide for their daily needs and for their care, the care they need. If they have other items of care over and above what is provided by the council, and they feel that that is more than the amount we are allowing, they just have to say so. There are some councils that only do it that way by asking people to itemise everything they spend. We're not asking them to do that, but people feel that they are spending more than the £40 and next year £30 on items that are not provided by social care, then they just have to tell us that. But what I particularly want to say, because I think I've answered all the questions, and if I haven't, please say so. What I'd like to know is, why wasn't this raised earlier, any of your concerns? This charging went out to consultation on the 21st of October. It ran till December, and today is the 20th of February. That is 4 months. And in those 4 months, I have been in this council chamber. Like many of my colleagues, we have an open door policy. We have a desk there. Any one of you could have raised any one of these concerns. Several of you have spoken to me socially and not raised any of these concerns. Several of you are on the scrutiny committee that went through it in detail and didn't raise these concerns. So you raised, Councillor Dunworth, you did raise the concern about people receiving the letter and how concerned they would be, and you did mention austerity. But I just feel that to leave it 4 months and not say a single word has got nothing to do with caring about people in the community. It's all about bringing it to this council. Thank you.
You've already spoken, Councillor Grimshaw, so been summed up. I want to move to the vote on this. I want to take... Is that you need a fifth of the chamber? All those in favour of a name vote? Maybe just. Right, now we'll have a name vote. I intend to take all 13 and recommendations on block and the amendment. Okay, so... No. I've turned other people down, so you can ask us after. Right. Ready to go?
Right, members, I'll just outline your name, and if you could just indicate if you're for or against the motion as normal. Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Bond. Councillor Bennon. Councillor Bridget. Councillor Campbell. Councillor Carty. Councillor Castle. Councillor Sesford. Councillor Clark. Councillor Crosby. Councillor Daly. Councillor Grant Davy.
Against.
Councillor Susan Davy.
Against.
Councillor Dickinson.
Against.
Councillor Dodd.
For.
Councillor Dunbar. Councillor Dungworth. Councillor Dunn. Councillor Flux. Councillor Foster.
Against.
Councillor Gallagher.
Against.
Councillor Gibson. Councillor Gobin. Councillor Grimshaw. Councillor Heppel. Councillor Hill. Councillor Homer. Councillor Horncastle. Councillor Hutchison. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Jones. Councillor Kennedy. Councillor Lang. Councillor Lang. Councillor Laurie. Councillor Ledger. Councillor Moore. Councillor Murray. Councillor Nesbitt. Councillor Oliver. Councillor Parry. Councillor Pattison. Councillor Purvis. Councillor Quinn. Councillor Reid. Councillor Renner Thompson. Councillor Rickerby. Councillor Riddle. Councillor Robinson. Councillor Roughhead. Councillor Sanderson. Councillor Seymour. Councillor Sharp. Councillor Simpson. Councillor Stewart. Councillor Stowe. Councillor Swinburne. Councillor Swithenbank. Councillor Thorne. Councillor Towns. Councillor Watson. Councillor Wearmouth. Councillor Webb. And finally, Councillor Wilson. Thank you, members.
Give us a minute.
You don't really leave it now. Yeah, it's fine.
36, 26.
We're doing it anyway.
Yeah. So 36 for, 26 again.
Right. The motion was carried, 36 votes for, 26 against, and 1 abstention. Thank you for that. Let's move on to item 10. Report of the Executive Director of Finance and Deputy Chief Executive Mid-Term Financial Plan 2019 and the Budget 2019-20. And I've got Councillors Jackson and Oliver.
Right, thank you, Chair. Here we are in the middle of our term, and I think we're starting to see a real change in the way this council sees itself, and actually, hopefully, the way this county sees itself. We're absolutely determined to be forward-looking, not backward-looking anymore. We're optimistic and ambitious for the whole of Northumberland and everyone in it. And we'll be different to Labour, or shall I call that momentum? We've got I'm not quite sure what to call it these days, but you know, we won't have that constant refrain of looking for handouts for this, that and the other. We won't constantly blame others when things go wrong. And we've stopped going to the government with a begging bowl every time we run out of fantasy money. But we're actually going to make the case for real investment in our county to make sure our county has a great future. And we've got some big successes to shout about over the last year. We've actually got the creation of this new North of Tyne Combined Authority. A £600 million investment fund, a lot of which will be spent in our county, and a vast range of powers in which to make a real difference. And we've got the Borderlands Growth Deal that we're working on, which will actually, when it's announced very soon indeed, will provide an investment fund of many millions for our county of Northumberland. So now, from a situation where we had this idea that we should just go begging to government for extra money, we've actually been given by a Conservative government to a Conservative administration the funding and powers to actually start to make our own future. And this budget is the start for Northumberland making a new future itself. We've now got the means to make Northumberland a great place. Northumberland a great place to live, to bring up a family and to have a career. A great place to visit, and a great place to build successful businesses that can trade on the world stage. But first, before we can do all of that, we need financial stability as a county council, because we are the largest organisation in this county, we employ the most people, we have the biggest depth of rooting into all of our communities. So we need to fix our own council's finances after years of Labour mismanagement. Last year we had, it's true, last year we had this great debate about the £65 million a year black hole that you left us. Well, we're in the process of fixing that, and over the next 3 years, our plan that we're putting to you today as a council will end up with a balanced budget, and that is no mean feat while we've got this ambition for our county. Now, their major problem was the huge debt level that they were proposing our council would go into. Their projected debts for this county council were £1.5 billion. Well, we've actually just about halved that, so we're now down to about £700 million. So that is a major achievement, and it gives that financial stability that this organisation and the whole county needs. We plan to maintain and improve essential services. So we're not talking about cuts. We're actually talking about doing things better, the essential services that people need, doing them better. And we do have increasing pressure. We've just heard about adult services, and there is increasing pressure on children's services too in this county. And there have been for a number of years, but it's part of the black hole of Labour's mismanagement. So we've done a base budget review, and over the next 3 years, we're going to put £15 million extra into adult services, £2.2 million extra into children's services, and extra funding for post-16 home-to-school transport of £800,000. So we're providing extra resources to look after the most vulnerable, unlike Labour. We're giving all young people in Northumberland equal access to a good education, unlike Labour. And unlike Labour, our Conservative administration is tackling head-on the long-term structural issues of our county. So there's a lack of housing for rent for local people. Well, we're coming forward with a brand new council house building programme which will reach right across the county. It will be one of the first in the country for decades. And it's been a long-term promise from Northumberland Conservatives. And the funny thing is that the Labour group and the Labour Party in Northumberland voted against it 5 years ago. We could have been there by now if we worked together. We've got poor standards of educational attainment in Northumberland. It's sad to say, but it's true. The proof is there. And after years of Labour, we're actually lying at the bottom of national scales of educational attainment, particularly in secondary education. Our secondary education in Northumberland, let's face it, is just not good enough for the modern world. So we're bringing forward a massive investment in all parts of our county after all those years of Labour neglect. And it's been so good to be able to progress our programme of schools investment. And we've announced just recently that we're going to rebuild yet another one of our high schools in the Seaton Valley, the Astley High School. So we're absolutely committed to that, and this year is the first year it's in the budget. We will build a business case for it, and we will deliver it, because that's what we do. We won't just talk about it in the way that many people have done in the past. Now, we're actually starting to look beyond that. So, particularly today for Berwick, I'm really pleased to announce an absolute firm commitment of £15 million to build the business case and to build a new high school and school facilities in Berwick. And that's thanks to the hard work of Councillor Daly and particularly the local MP, Anne-Marie Trevelyan. And we're also promising now, because we've been working on this for some time, to work on the business case for major improvements at James Calvert Spence College in Amble. So one by one, we're tackling the areas of our county where there is need of major investment. Another area of massive neglect in education is in terms of special educational needs. And we're spending millions as a county council sending young people born and bred in Northumberland out of county to get looked after properly. We haven't built the facilities to do it ourselves. Well, we're starting that, and we're just about to open a major new facility in the middle of Ashington called Ashdale School. And as soon as it opens, we'll invite all councillors there, because it is the most fantastic facility, specially designed to look after those young people with special educational needs. It's really state-of-the-art, and I'm really proud that we as an administration are able to deliver these fantastic investments in our county. Another structural issue is roads. Roads, again, have suffered years of neglect under Labour. Well, we've started a huge investment programme. We've actually got millions of pounds of extra investment from a Conservative government to a Conservative administration. The last award was an extra £7.8 million, and we're just about to press the button on that major investment now. We made a major commitment to spend and invest £100 million in our roads over the 4 years of our administration. Well, we're well on the way to doing that, and this budget confirms that. We've got a long-term programme, but up and down the county, people everywhere can see the difference that that investment in roads has made. There has been a huge improvement just in the last 12 months, and we're going to do more. Car parking. There hasn't been any new car parking built in Northumberland by the County Council for years and years and years. But for the first time, we're actually investing in our car parking in our towns, because that actually depends, the lifeblood of our towns very often depends on having sufficient and accessible car parking. We're building extra spaces. We've actually established where the proven need is. We've got a fully funded plan that we're putting in place, and there's a £10 million investment programme in extra car parking up and down the county, and I'm sure that's welcomed everywhere. The health and well-being of our county. Again, it's something that we feel really strongly about because we're the lead authority on that, and we think that as the champion of communities, we should be doing more and more to improve the health and well-being of every single person in our county. Well, one thing I've talked about before is we've got pride in our parks, so we're investing massively in places like Druridge Bay. It's a prime attraction in our county, and actually Druridge Bay is a jewel in our crown, and it's about time it had a little bit of TLC, but we're doing that now. Hurst Park in Ashington, £1.7 million to rebuild that fantastic facility in the middle of a town that's been neglected for decades, and that's just a start. And we've got a programme to upgrade and rebuild our leisure centres. Again, after years of neglect, the backlog maintenance on our leisure centres runs into many, many millions. Well, we've announced the new leisure centre in Berwick. It will be in planning by the spring. It will be delivered as quickly as ever possible, a £20 million project. After 42 years of nothing in Berwick, all of a sudden things are starting to happen. And it's only taken us about a year and a half to do it. Think what the difference in Berwick's going to be in another 3 or 4 years' time. It'll be the rebirth of a town, that town along with many others. Morpeth, we've announced that, and it's in the budget for the first time this year, £18 million for a brand new facility in Morpeth, which is much needed. The Riverside Leisure Centre has been falling apart again for decades, and just to repair and restore what is there is not the right way forward, and we've actually got a business case to show that new investment is what's needed. And we've got backlog issues in Hexham and other towns. Active Northumberland, our leisure operator, was rescued from absolute financial collapse by us last year at the end of the last Labour administration. But now they have a sound financial plan, and we're backing them with investment on a significant basis. Now, we all need vibrant towns right across Northumberland. We all know, as councillors, they're the very heart of our communities. And our towns are also suffering from years of neglect from Labour. Nothing can be done overnight, but actually this year we're going to deliver a new town centre in Bedlington. This year we're going to make major progress and get well on the way to delivering a brand new town centre for Ashington. And what a contrast that is with Labour. They were going to waste up to £80 million of public money on moving this building, County Hall, 6 miles up the road to the middle of Ashington, which wouldn't have been the right site for it anyway. No gain, absolute utter waste of public money. What have we got? A brand new centre that the people of Ashington will be proud of, hundreds and hundreds of brand new jobs, and we've got private sector interest queuing up to invest in that town. It's a new start for the biggest town in our county. And we're making real progress on the Hexham Old bus station sites. I think there's a lot to be look forward to in Hexham, in particular over the next year. We're taking all of the opportunities we're given from government, from the North of Tyne Combined Authority and from Borderlands, and we're determined to make progress. And we're going to work on plans with local communities on many other towns that make up our great county. And after the recent publicity, I must say something about transport, because transport investment is actually the real key to our long-term future, and there are exciting developments and opportunities. Improving access and transport is just so important for Northumberland, and again, there hasn't been any significant progress for a considerable amount of time. And they're two absolutely important schemes that are built into this budget. One is the Blythe Relief Road, and we know, anyone who's been to Blythe will know the degree of congestion is just strangling that town. There's new industry there, there are thousands of new homes, and yet there's been no infrastructure put in place. Well, we're going to do it, and I hope the people of Blythe go along with us with that. The new Northumberland Rail passenger line. Again, we've got an opportunity for major national funding. We will provide the business case as a county council. We've already provided £3.5 million to draw up an absolute detailed scheme to take to government. After decades of talk and no action, all of a sudden it's changed. We're actually doing something, and we've got a real chance to land that prize. And why has this, the press have actually asked on this one, why has this new passenger line, or resurrected passenger line, not been delivered so far after all of the years of talk? Well, you've only got to ask the local MPs, the MPs for Ashington and Blythe, why there's been a lot of talk and no action. Why did this county council not do anything more progressive and more proactive over its period of Labour rule? Well, Grant Davies here, who used to be the leader, he can actually tell us why nothing happened over the last 4 years. And ask the local Labour-run councils in that area, why has it not happened? And it's a scheme that will make such a huge difference to the lives of thousands of our residents in the South East. Yet we've had talk and no action. A project that has been left on the shelf for ages. Well, now we have a Conservative administration. We're finally taking action. And yet, what do we see from Labour, or is it Momentum? I can't quite see the difference at the moment. Well, they've published a so-called alternative budget on Facebook. Well, a lot of it seems to be the things that we're already doing and already improving. So, on council tax support, there is still this empty denial of their original plans to take £5 million from the most vulnerable people right across our county. On youth services, I assume that they do support our existing plans to improve youth services and target them to help the most deprived communities. On recycling, after 4 years under Labour of no progress whatsoever on recycling rates, are they going to support our new plans for bringing in curbside glass collection for the first time and increasing recycling rates right across Northumberland for the first time in years? On low-cost rental housing, why did they vote against our Conservative plans to bring in a new generation of council housing? It's just unbelievable that that can't happen from a Labour group. And on support for the low paid, will they not recognise the fantastic help available from our council staff and the potential of the new Northumberland Community Bank to help those who are financially excluded in our communities? I think that they live in cloud cuckoo land, but that's up to the public to make their own judgment on that one. Our budget here is about prudent planning. Our budget is about making essential services better. Our budget is providing what our communities need. It's tackling long-term issues neglected for years by Labour. It's providing a better and more prosperous future for every single person in Northumberland. It's about making our county great. Our budget is making sure that everyone right across Northumberland feels as though they're part of our community. And our budget is about making a county that works for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to take a few minutes to sort of highlight a few points, and apologies if some of these are repeated. In 2017, the Northumberland Conservative Party was elected by the people of this county to reverse the dangerous policies of a Labour administration out of control. There was a huge gap in the budget, rapidly rising debt, and large parts of the county were completely ignored. We fought that election on a very simple and very equitable manifesto that resounded with voters and won seats that nobody expected us to win and ran Labour very close in some of their safest seats. The political landscape in Northumberland has changed. People from Ashington and Blythe up to Berwick and from Prudhoe out to Haltwhistle realise now that a Conservative administration offers the brightest future for this county. Labour introduced a punitive tax system on sixth form students but failed to deal with the challenges in education in this county. We promised to reverse that in our manifesto, and we've delivered. We're investing in schools and raising leadership standards because we understand that we must give everybody in the county the best possible start. Labour planned to take us to £1.5 billion in debt by borrowing money to invest in shopping centres, executive houses and property outside of Northumberland. Left unchecked, this would have been catastrophic. We promised to abolish Arch, and we've delivered on that. A new company, Advanced Northumberland, will be building extra care housing, council housing and regenerating our town centres, not trying to turn a quick profit on dodgy property schemes. Labour planned to spend up to £80 million building a new county hall in Ashington, a white elephant that wouldn't have created new jobs and would have simply moved hundreds of jobs a few miles down the road. We will deliver a new development in Ashington with proper new jobs and new facilities that residents can be proud of at Portland Park. We're also delivering significant regeneration projects in Bedlington, Blythe, Berwick, Prudhoe, just to name a few. We're creating more and better paid jobs in Northumberland and making this county a better place to do business and invest in. Labour's record on roads was poor, and coming from my part of the county, many rural roads were in a shocking state. Rural areas were ignored generally, and even our local newspaper, the Hexham Courant, they refused to engage with that newspaper and publish public notices. We're investing a significant programme in roads across the county. We're fixing potholes, and we're seeing central government investment in our main roads. Labour have talked for 2 decades about reopening the Northumberland line connecting Ashington, Blythe and Bedlington to Newcastle. A Labour government has never delivered that, but a Conservative government working with a Conservative administration will deliver it. I believe that everybody in this chamber wants the same thing. We all want the opportunity to offer everybody in our county a more prosperous and a better future. The fundamental differences are about how we believe we'll achieve that. Labour have had decades running this county to address the problems across our county, significantly in education and in health. GCSE outcomes, 3 times better in some parts of the county than others. Health, life expectancy, 12 years better in the best ward than in the worst ward. We're determined to address these fundamental issues and invest in transformative change. We won't take a sticking plaster approach. We're investing in capacity across the county to provide vital social care, leisure facilities, parks, and a modern business infrastructure. This is a budget that deals with the serious challenges we face and offers increased prosperity for everybody in Northumberland, a county that works for everyone, and I hope you can support it.
Right, I've got 2 speakers. Councillor Bridget first.
What I will say is, can I thank the member for Corbridge for his carefully crafted statement for the benefit of the press, I'm sure.
I don't think we need any lessons from you, Councillor Bridget.
No, and I don't need them here. Mine are just a couple of questions, if I may. Just actually going through the budget papers themselves on pages 53, 54 and 55. If I could seek clarification from the portfolio holders in relation to them, if I may. For operational efficiencies within local services, highways maintenance, can I seek assurances from Councillor Sanderson that that does not include frontline staff working on the highways themselves in terms of resurfacing, etc., the people that our residents see on the ground on a day-to-day basis. The second one, I know, and it will be a question that's raised by my parish councils in particular, in planning services, operational efficiencies, introducing electronic town and parish council consultation. I'm sure that's in relation to new planning applications. How do we solve that problem in areas where we don't have reasonable or decent broadband to download and obviously utilise those applications? That is a question that will be asked. And my final one is on page 55. I presume review the community chest budget, and 86,000 means we're cutting the community chest budgets by 86,000.
Ben?
Yeah, on the
Here's a mic.
Yeah, thank you.
On the question that you've asked about highway staff, no, this will not affect highway staff on the ground. As I think Council knows, I am exceptionally proud of our staff, the men and women on the frontline services, and they will be protected as far as we possibly can. This saving is about making sure that we do our communications better, staff to staff, officers to officers, better use of IT. But one of the biggest savings here is around the new way that we are now fixing potholes and defects in the road, because what we are doing now is we are cutting out sections, we are replacing it with much longer lasting material, instead of just going back and forwards with splodges of tar that come out after 2 or 3 weeks. So we feel that this will give us a significant saving by doing the job better, and I think you'll see that. Thank you. Nick, Councillor Oliver, do you want to... There was something there about broadband.
The question about providing electronic plans and planning applications to local councils. I believe that if there is a clear demonstration that it's just simply not possible to access those electronically, we'll look at that on a case-by-case basis. And then the other point about the community chest, we are reducing the community chest budget on the central pot, but we're also looking at, and there will be an announcement sometime in the next few weeks, at something else that will actually, I think, provide a greater opportunity for community organisations to get funding. So we're not doing it without
revenue members, small schemes.
No, it's not that. But we've got some plans in process, and we'll announce them shortly. I think the long-term prospect for local community groups is probably quite positive, and I think the central part of the community chest has not always been fully subscribed to anyway.
Right, Councillor Davey.
Yes. Well, I think most of you in this room will know this is my last meeting of the County Council as the leader of the Labour group. And the reason it's the last time I'll speak in the Council chamber today is because of what your leader said when he opened out about his budget speech today, that he's made real change, the Council, in the way the Council operates. Well, that's true. That's really true, and it's probably the only true thing he said, by the way, in his budget speech. But the truth is, we've now moved to the Agricultural Council. This is the cattle mart of councils nationally. We've got a gap now for the barley sowing season, or the lambing season, or the cattle birthing season, or whatever that season is, from now until the beginning of May. That's the way you've changed this council. It's unrecognisable in the whole of local government as a proper council that deals with a £1 billion budget a year. It's a mess of the first order. Some of the other things that you came out with were about, we're going to build council houses. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm willing to stick in my poor low-quality car in comparison with yours, Councillor Jackson, and drive you around the council houses that we built. Because we built them from Embleton to Blythe, and they're absolutely fabulous. And what you're saying about the new generation of council housing, what is that? Is that prefabs? Are you going back to prefabs for people who may not be able to afford to have as much as yourself? And the other thing that you mentioned, of course, is all in the 2017 Labour manifesto. The rebuilding of schools, the financing of all these great things that you've just patted yourself on the back. And now what I didn't see in the budget was a back patting machine, which you must have bought, at some point in time. So we'll come on to Councillor Oliver, and I've named you both so you'll both be able to have a lovely dig in his black hole fanatical council stuff. The black hole, as everybody in this room knows, because you all know about the black hole, was created by moving the medium-term financial plan by an additional year. And that black hole, therefore, sucked in another £35 million worth of cuts. Cuts created by your government, a government in total disarray with its austerity programme, and you're simply mirror imaging the attacks your government is making on the poor of this nation. And these attacks are just diabolical. This one of the best, and keep it the best, on social services. It is one of the best. and it was one of the best when we left it. You had one of the best amounts of money when you left it. The accounts were perfect. EY, the auditor, said they were wonderful. You know, so whatever you say, they were wonderful. And you stood up there, Councillor Jackson, and patted the outgoing chief executive on the back for keeping a strong and stable set of finances for you to work on. You said that at the outset, and it's still true today, because we left you with far too much money. We should have spent it much quicker, but we didn't. So we're moving several amendments today. We'd like to reinstate the county tax support scheme for the most vulnerable. And I'd like to move that. And what we'll do is we'll bring the money that you're retaining on the 75% council business rates retention will cover the cost of that. The reason for that, and the reason we wish to bring that back in, is your plan takes out of the economy, the local economies of Blythe and Ashington, almost £700,000. It takes nearly £250,000 out of Berwick's economy, but £700,000 out of the pockets of the poorest people in this county. Now, the poorest people, and it doesn't matter which papers you read, whether it's the Prince's Trust, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, the poorest people are deprived in more ways than just council tax benefit claims. They're usually deprived in transport deprivation. Transport deprivation means that they have to shop locally, and you're going to kill off the local shops by grabbing the money back off these people who can ill afford it to start with. And we've heard about food bank rates of 17 a day in a small town like Blythe. That's tremendous, because you can only get 3 a year. These are massive problems that you have in an area of poverty that you have completely and utterly ignored. You are ignoring the deprived areas of this county, and you're making the situation worse in both rural and urban areas through the way you're wishing to treat poor people. Our second amendment today is to be maintain the current charges for care at home in Northumberland. We believe you can finance that directly through the growth in housing. Your income is rapidly rising every year between here and Blythe, because we've had a phone around to the builders. There's almost 800 properties for sale, brand new. That's 800 sets of council tax you'll have coming in next year. So don't think it's unaffordable, because it's affordable whether you increase your revenue savings from 55 million to 75 million by stuffing it into reserves or not. It's affordable for this county, and it's the best thing to do for the people. On your capital spend of 588 million, you know, you're delegating the spend to councillors. Well, some of you in this room might not trust me, but I certainly don't trust a number of you. You know, it's something I would never like to see. We're proposing a cross-party capital working group that will work with the councillors who have got this delegation, because you'll vote the delegation through today. We've just had a vote where you're outnumbered quite rapidly. And we will actually help you by scrutinising the spend and make sure it goes to the right places and not the pockets of people who are not the right people. And on the Ashington, Blythe and Tyne line, right, and the Blythe Relief Road, it's in your budget for 2023. It's past your council, so don't say you're delivering it. You're not delivering it at all. What we're proposing is that you put that borrowing requirement into the budget today as an amendment for both of those schemes, and as the Mayor calls off that money to introduce that scheme, because the Mayor is the representative for Transport for the North, now that you've got a combined authority, it'll be in place. And then you can crow about it. And then you can say, I, Peter Jackson, delivered the IAB and T-Line. I, Peter Jackson, delivered the Blythe Relief Road. At this moment in time, I, somebody else, after you're wiped out and I've retired, will deliver it. Because you've got the budget. You've got the budget in the next council's spend. So, just to wind up, I don't like your budget. It attacks ordinary people. It attacks ordinary businesses across this county, and it actually ruins the county. So, the only true thing that I haven't said in this chamber today, the only truth I would like to expand upon today is on Councillor Bourne and Councillor Dodd. They are the only two councillors where I have proof that they are truthful councillors over this £80 million spend in Ashington. I have an absolutely wonderful photograph that will have framed and sent to your office, Councillor Dodd, of Councillor Bourne and Councillor Dodd with a white elephant that says £40 million. And that was the truth. It was £32 million for the spend on the new building, and the remainder was to build some shops. So let me get that out and about, because that is the
photograph
truth.
Because I don't think I was on that photograph.
You certainly were. You look lovely beside Councillor Bourne and the one I've got. So, winding up, we've got 4 amendments. I'm going to read them out gradually because I think I need them seconded. Reinstate the county tax support scheme for the most. I'm proposing it. Maintain the current care charges for the care at home in Northumberland, and I'm proposing it. To create a cross-party capital working group to scrutinise your over £500 million worth of capital spend, and I'm proposing it. And to bring the ABT line and the Blythe Relief Road funding into this budget as a spend that could be used by the new mayor. And I'm pleased that I'm not having to stand up here, but I've got one more thing to say as my time's running out. Your medium-term financial plan and your budget, we're very, very worried that it's based on this. This here is a report by your secret cabinet. This is a secret cabinet report because it says so on the top. It's to cut the terms and conditions of all of the workforce of this council. Your cabinet proposed it. I think it's a disgrace, and that's how you're funding your medium-term financial plan and keeping the reserves as large as they are.
Grant, you're out of time by 45 seconds. So, right, I'm seeking advice on whether we can actually take what you've just proposed as a motion. Do you want
Can we just address a couple of those points while you're seeking that advice?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Well, I think... no, I'm just going to address a couple of the points that the Labour leader has made. I think, first of all, he talks about a £1 billion budget. And now I understand why they're looking for a new leader, because it's £200 million short of that at least. So, I mean, it's a mistake. No.
Yes, hang on. Your amendments that you say, they really should have gone through some process before this meeting, because whatever you say, there is an impact on budgets. You know the rules, Grant. You have to be put in front of officers to look at that, your proposals to an alternative budget, and you have 5 days, and you were asked about that. Right, okay, if that's the way you want to play it, we can go down the road and say, put all your amendments together, and we'll see if they're defeated. Councillor Jackson.
Can I just ask about another couple of procedural points? Because there is that serious point that none of this has been taken past our Section 151 Finance Officer to see actually what the knock-on effects on the budget. Yes, we have. You know fine well who it is, because we're back to the old one. Anyway, I think the council will be really abrogating its responsibility to set a actually professionally advised budget if they took this into account. But actually, there's another point about procedure of the council, because Last month, we did make a serious decision about the council tax support scheme, which is actually 5 times less damaging than the Labour proposal before. But the council has debated the issue very thoroughly. It's been through the council's processes, and a decision was made. And yet here we are, just 1 month later, and the Labour group is trying to change that. And yet, even worse than that, just 5 minutes ago, we discussed the care charge package and made a decision as a council, and here we have the Labour group trying to reverse a decision within about 5 minutes. Now, my belief is that you're not allowed to do that under the Constitution, and I'd like some advice on that particular point.
We're being asked for advice on the Constitution.
It's not a 6-month rule. You can't reverse a decision.
I think the point in relation to the reinstatement of the council tax scheme is a valid one in terms of the procedural nicety, in that a decision was taken by full council at their last meeting, and no decision should be reversed or changed within 6 months without a written notice of motion being presented by a requisite number of members, the precise number of which I'm not absolutely certain about, but of course we don't have that. We just have the verbal amendment from Councillor Davey from the floor today, so that cannot go forward. The other amendments, as I understand them, and forgive me, Councillor Davey, I don't fully understand them, but I think they should be open for some debate, albeit...
The charges one, though, has just been agreed.
Yes, sorry, the charges one, as I understand, that's the point where I'm not absolutely certain about what was being proposed, but the amendment that relates to the adult care charges, if there's a proposal to in some way reverse the decision that the council have just taken, then that falls under the 6-month rule. So that really only leaves, unless I'm going to be correct, that only leaves the 2 motions that can validly be voted on this afternoon. And I would just echo the leader's sentiments about the ability of, or the lack of ability of officers, and particularly the Section 151 officer, to comment on the impact that those amendments would have on the budget. That's not to say that they shouldn't and can't be voted upon, but I think members, I think it's right for me as monitoring officer just to counsel members in relation to the inability of the Section 151 officer and other officers to comment on the precise financial nature of those decisions. Proposed decisions.
There's no point of order. There isn't. I've been through every point of order that has been asked for a point of order with the legal officer, and none of them have been points of order. So I'm not taking them. I'm not taking them. I'm not taking them. I'm sorry.
And the first one. And no, you
no.
can't do that.
Can we just ask him to repeat the other 2?
You've just had advice that said you can only have the 2.
Chairman, if I could just clarify, in terms of which amendments go forward, your ruling is final under the Council Rules of Procedure. So whilst Councillor Davey has indicated that he wishes to withdraw the adult care amendment, and that can be accepted, I have no doubt. In terms of his insistence or his requirement for the council tax scheme adoption to be put to the vote, your ruling on that would be final as to whether or not that should be put forward for that vote. But I would ask you to bear in mind the 6-month rule that was just been outlined.
Hang on, Councillor Grimshaw, there is a list of people who wish to speak. I do have you on the list.
Well, can we make a decision about what we're talking about?
Yes.
Not the first 2, but the second 2.
Can you repeat the 2 that might be allowed?
They are allowing people to discuss and debate today and vote on, or to create a cross-party capital working group which will scrutinise the over £500 million of capital spend you've got within your budget and medium-term financial plan. It was proposed by myself and seconded by Councillor Dungworth. And the second one is to bring forward the borrowing requirement from 2023 for the Ashington, Blythe and Tyne Line and the Blythe Relief Road. It's simply to put it into the current budget so that if the opportunity arises with the rail companies to bring this scheme forward, or with Highways England to bring the pinch point scheme forward, the money's in place. It may not get spent till 2023, but if it's in place and moves along annually, then it's there when we need it. Yeah.
Yes?
What I don't understand about the bits that you want to add, it would be physically impossible to start the Ashington Blythe Tyne line tomorrow or Christmas or next year. It's just not possible, because you've got to order stuff, you've got to get so there isn't any point in putting it in the capital programme now. There's just no point. And as far as having a scrutiny of the capital programme, is that not what scrutiny does already? I mean, I've got.
To the cabinet.
Yeah, but you could call that in. It would be under pre-scrutiny and everything to start with. So I'm afraid I'm a bit lost as to the thrust of this argument, to be honest with you.
Right. I don't think there's anything that we can really take forward, Grant. It hasn't gone through the process. I think, to say let's move it forward when we're relying on other people to bring money in, I'm not taking here, Grant, I'm sorry. Yeah, just get up.
You've got 588 million pounds to spend that you're wishing to delegate the councillors to spend. We're saying that needs better scrutiny, a proper...
We do have a scrutiny system. Well, if you turned up, if you bother to turn up, it might be. But
can I just address a couple of these points? First of all, in terms of the capital programme, we do have a scrutiny system in place. It's the same scrutiny system that existed under your administration. The difference is, under your administration, there was £450 million that didn't require any scrutiny whatsoever and was delegated to you and to Stephen Mason to spend without any proper scrutiny. We have abolished that. We've brought in proper governance, and we have proper scrutiny for our capital spend. I think so those capital decisions will go to Cabinet, and they'll go through the normal scrutiny process before being approved. So I don't see any requirement to make any changes to that. It's worked perfectly well during this administration so far, and that element of it worked pretty well during your administration. Right. And if we can, okay. The other point around the bringing forward the capital spend on the Blythe, Ashington, or on the Northumberland line is not really necessary. We're setting a budget for this year. We know what we're going to spend in this year. The rest of the medium-term financial plan will be readdressed in next year's budget. And if we need to bring stuff forward, we can do it at that point. So to rework it all, we would have to rework, and it wouldn't be sensible to bring something into a budget that we absolutely know with certainty we're not going to be doing that element of it. There's this process to go through. It's a well-documented process, and it will take time. So there is no reason to bring that bit forward.
Yeah. Right, Grant, I've taken advice, and we're going to allow you to have two motions or amendments that you have. Amendments? I'll put them straight to the voters, and we can get on. Yep. So, right. Well, let's strictly speak. Right, can I remind us of your first amendment?
No, Chair, I propose to the meeting that we move immediately to the vote and we have both together.
Agreed. Right, okay.
Chair, the budget, so it's a name vote anyway.
It's a name vote. So it's for the amendment or against the amendments or against. Yeah. Councillor Armstrong. Against.
Councillor Vaughan.
Against.
Councillor Benyon.
Against.
Councillor Bridget. I think he's gone. Councillor Campbell. Councillor Carty. Councillor Castle.
Against.
Councillor Sessford.
Against.
Councillor Clark. Councillor Crosby.
Against.
Councillor Daly.
Against.
Councillor Davy, Grant Davy. Councillor Susan Davy. Councillor Dickinson. Councillor Dodd. Councillor Dunbar. Councillor Dungworth. Councillor Dunn. Councillor Flux. Councillor Foster. Councillor Gallagher. Councillor Gibson. Councillor Gobin. Councillor Grimshaw. Councillor Heppel. Councillor Hill. Councillor Homer. Councillor Horncastle. Councillor Hutchison. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Jones. Councillor Kennedy. Councillor Lang.
First answer. I'll
Councillor Lang, can you just confirm which way you wish to vote? Take that as a 4. Councillor Lowry. Councillor Ledger. Councillor Moore. Councillor Murray. Councillor Nesbitt. Councillor Oliver.
Against.
Councillor Parry. Councillor Patterson. Councillor Purvis. Councillor Quinn. Councillor Reid. Councillor Renner Thompson. Councillor Rickerby. Councillor Riddle. Councillor Robinson. Councillor Roughhead. Councillor Sanderson. Councillor Seymour. Councillor Sharp. Councillor Simpson. Councillor Stewart. Councillor Stowe. Councillor Swinburne. Councillor Swithenbank. Councillor Thorne. Councillor Towns. Councillor Watson. Councillor Wearmouth. Councillor Webb. Councillor Wilson. Thank you, members.
Give us a minute.
Chair, when we busy counting, I wish all of the Tories in this chamber today a very happy barley sowing season. And I'll be in the back benches on the 1st of May, and I'll still be throwing drinks at the front.
Actually, the barley sowing season was in September. So again, you're months behind. We're coming up to the lambing season and the calving season. So you know, I'll obviously the books, the magazines I've given you over the years have not counted for anything.
The national 40-22 drinking season.
Chairman, 22 for and 40 against the motion.
Right, 22 for and 40 against, so it falls. So let's move on to the budget. And I had Councillor Reid. Do you want to speak? I'll go down the list of people who indicated.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I just wanted to remind everybody a bit of the history. I get a bit fed up when the leader stands up and says, this is a forward-looking council, this is what we're going to do, and then spends the next 5 minutes complaining about what happened in the past. And also, you made a slight slip. You said Ashington was the largest town in the county council. It's not, it's the third. Blythe is the biggest, then Cramlington, then Ashington, I believe. That's all right, no need to apologise. I'm sure he did. Right, so on to what I've got to say then. First of all, we've all had this and we've all read it. And each year we come in here, we're expected to know and understand what's in this, because at the end of the day, what we end up with, all of this ends up as that, the bill. And what I'm concerned about this year is that this is more of a fudget than a budget. And you haven't addressed the underlying funding problems of the council. What you've done is you've just chosen to charge people more. You think the way of getting out of this is by charging people more, and the Labour Party thought the way of getting out of this was spending more. You know, you're both wrong. It's a risky strategy, this, because you can't control how much you save, but you've got no control over your income, really. So you start charging people more for parking, you start charging people more to go to the leisure services, you start charging people more for the services that they get at home, then they can actually choose not to spend it. So you end up not making the money that you thought you were going to. So there's a few things in here. When you read it, it says schedule of efficiencies. In actual fact, it's not a schedule of efficiencies, because 38% of the £12 million this year was actually an increase in charges. 38%. So you're not actually tackling the underlying problem, you're just charging people more and not actually looking at how you can deliver it more efficiently. And what worries me even more is the over life of the plan, which is between now and 2022, 56% of what you're claiming to be efficiencies are actually increases in what you're going to charge people for all the services we deliver. Not the statutory stuff, but the stuff people can actually choose to have or not. You need to start looking fundamentally at the workings of the council, because charging people more will not necessarily get you to where you want to be. And when you dig deep into the budget, you see that the garden waste charge has gone up to £40. Now, we all realise we got our letters a month ago, so the council didn't, this chamber didn't decide, the cabinet decided, just like it did in previous years, to stick the charge up. And Andrew Terrett reminded me, when we're talking about this, that our administration only got beat on 2 votes. One of those votes was that we thought the garden waste scheme bins should be put up to £25, and you all ganged up against us and decided to leave it at 20. And here we are, 5 years later, it's 40 quid. You know, for goodness sake. You put it up to 38, so let's not talk about that. So, also buried in the text is cuts here and there that perhaps people don't think they're going to notice, but there's £100,000 taken out of tree maintenance. Now you might think, oh well, that is a big proportion of tree maintenance, and as you know, we have millions of trees that are our responsibility. And apart from dog dirt, the biggest complaint I get is about trees in neighbourhoods that are too big. And decades have gone by, and we've not tackled this issue. And I'm sure all of us have streets in our divisions where the trees are twice the size of the houses. We need to be putting more money into that, not less. I don't like the cut in the community grant. It's vital. It keeps little schemes going. The Sea Scouts, the canoe people, judo clubs. We shouldn't be cutting that. And the other thing I don't like is the tens of thousands of pounds that we're spending on devolution. We were promised, I don't know whether it was in this chamber, but it was somewhere, that devolution was not going to cost us as a council anything, because central government was going to pay for it all. And yet, squirreled away in here, there's at least £100,000 of our money being spent to support the devolution mechanism, if you like. And there's a couple of questions I've got. The Ashington, Blythe and Tyne line. You announced somewhere that you were going to spend £3.46 million, and there's actually in the budget there's £680,000, because I question that, because it was 7 million before. Now, I've been told that this 3.46 million has got to be cash, because you can't capitalise it. So I'd like to know where the 3.46 million is coming from, and does it include that £680,000? And I think, other than a couple of barbed comments about the Police and Crime Commissioner, last year the increase was 12.2%. This year it's 21%. 21%? For a body that has been of absolutely no use to us at all. And we're about to do it again in May. Because I'll tell you what, the bill you get this year will be the last time you get a bill that doesn't have a mayoral precept on it. Because if you think that the mayor's not going to want to raise money for his people's bank, for whatever socialist ideas he's got, the only way he's going to be able to get it is by charging us for it. And I think that's a damn disgrace. The other couple of things I just wanted to say were about the past, really. We're back to where I started from. The leader's complaining about underinvestment in sports centres and how terrible Morpeth was. Can I just remind him, 10 years ago, he was responsible for that? This council, which we all seem to forget, this council is actually only 9 years old. And this brings to my final point. In the southeast, when the town councils were created, I now find myself paying more to the town council than I did to Blythe Valley Borough Council. So we've had 10 years of local government reform and we're back to where we were before. Something's got to change. So I cannot vote for this because you're not tackling the fundamental reasons for the problem we're in, which is not getting a grip of the organisation and squeezing it until it cries.
Do you want to take? Yeah.
I think, first of all, the savings that have been identified across the 3 years of the medium-term financial plan, 34% of them are coming from income generation, and the other 66 are coming from service reviews, management of vacancies, and contract savings. So there are some savings at the back end of the medium-term financial plan that will be that are still yet to be identified, and there's significant work in progress to identify them. We will address those, and I share your belief that we need to run this council as efficiently as possible, and there will be opportunities as we progress through the remainder of this administration. But it is 34% over the 3 years. In terms of the... I have, and that's... yeah. The 3.46 in reserve million has come from reserves. So you're right, it's a revenue cost at the moment. If the scheme goes ahead, it will then be capitalised. And the other contribution, which is the revenue contribution to the running cost of the North of Tyne area, is coming out of revenue costs, but obviously there's a reduction in other contributions to the North East Combined Authority. So I think the net effect is about nil.
Okay, Councillor Bourne.
Sorry, Chair, can I just the truth clarification about that? It's a serious point. It was just about 3.1 million pounds. Yeah. What about the 680,000? What about the 680,000 pounds that's in the budget as it stands?
Right, take that to David Bourne.
That's a revenue. Can you be specific about which line? Sorry.
No, I want to move. There's a lot of speakers. Okay. You've had a long speech today. You nearly got your 10 minutes. Councillor Bourne.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd just like to pay tribute to the leader of the Labour Group and his final speech. It's a sad occasion for all of us.
No.
Well, exactly. First drinks are on me because, Grant, you are the greatest asset that Northumberland Conservatives has ever had. Now, I'm an avid reader of the Northumberland Gazette website, and in fact, there's my pictures all over it this morning. But there was another article with an even more attractive councillor on it, pictured, the chairman of the Labour Group, and he was proudly announcing that he was going to present, or the Labour Group were going to present, their alternative budget today. Now, I've got one budget. There doesn't seem to have been an alternative budget proposed. We've had a couple of weird amendments, half of which weren't obviously very well thought through. I mean, I do understand, that the days of illegal budgets are back because Derek Hatton's back in the Labour Party. But, we did think that you would actually come with something more than, literally a Facebook post. We used to accuse you of doing things in the back of a fag packet, but that does disservice to fag packets, frankly. But so I'd just like to say, talk about this budget. There are things which are hard decisions. We've discussed some of them already. There are some very good capital projects. I'd like to particularly commend the new leisure centre at Morpeth, which is very sorely needed. And as I'm now working in Morpeth, I had declared interest because I go to the leisure centre now at lunchtime, so I will get a personal but non-prejudicial interest in that in due course. Oh yeah, I do. So I would just like to encourage all members to support this budget. It's a good budget for this council at this time. It makes difficult decisions, but it does the things in a moderate and measured way to progress things for all the people in this county. And I will commend the budget.
Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few points and then a question at the end. As always, I made this point last year, if you're outside a main political group, particularly if you're an independent, which is all the rage these days, it is difficult because the budget involves dozens, if not hundreds, of different proposals. So what you're doing is you're looking at it on balance, looking at what is inevitably the curate's egg, good in parts, and what you prefer on balance, not to do what I'm sure the Liberal Democrats are going to do, the cowardly thing, and just abstain. So when people come up and say, this is really good, this investment, oh, we didn't vote against that, and then the more controversial things, you say, oh no, we didn't vote for that. So I hope people either vote for or against and don't take the cowardly route out. There's many things that I like in this budget, and I'll get on to Berwick in a minute. There is the very responsible attitude to dealing with the debt. It's the easiest thing to think, let's just spend and store up problems, as the Labour Party are always inclined to do. You used to have Labour administrations, both at country and county level, who used to be well-meaning but ultimately disastrous. You lot were just disastrous. There's things that I like on that you're reversing a lot of the balmy policies of the previous administration. There's things that I think you could do better, and the way I voted, I know there's tough decisions, but I think a better line should be drawn in protecting the most vulnerable. Now, in terms of Berwick, and I did write these notes before the extra amendment today, the extra appendix. In Berwick, under the previous administration, we got sod all. And there was sod all for 42 years under the Liberal Democrat administrations. Now we're getting a lot. We'd like more. In fact, you did worse than sod all. You actually did a lot of damage to our town with all the shenanigans with Arch, etc. Thought you want me to join your lot. We're getting... I'll try to hide my disappointment. The Swan Centre, we're getting 20 million. There's 700,000 in the maltings, but hopefully, fingers crossed, next month that will be a hell of a lot more. We're doing very well in the LTP. And the final note I was going to mention is Councillor Daly has given a commitment. He is concerned and ready to act on education in Berwick. And I'm very pleased to see the extra commitment for £15 million. So he has actually been true to his word. We did talk about the Conservative Party maybe could do more to help the more vulnerable, but I notice you've helped a vulnerable MP by attaching her to the good news. So that's me. I won't be invited to the Sun now after that. So all in all, just the final question would be, if you got any more information on that, because that is really good news. And regarding the council tax, the council house building programme, we do need a lot of those in Berwick. There's a real shortage of 3 and 4 bedroom houses. So if you could remember us there as well.
Okay, Councillor Campbell. Have you forgotten?
I was asleep. I hope you've all had fun at play school today. I am disappointed. I'm very disappointed that you've gone ahead with the poor tax. It's a bit like the poll tax was in the olden days, and we fought against that. and it's only the poor that will suffer. You won't collect it, I guarantee you. This time next year, when we'll ask how much you've collected, you'll find you will not collect it. People can't afford to. Most people, and I know 2 or 3 families at this moment in time who are struggling to eat and to pay put an extra burden on them and have an extra letter of demand coming in their doors. You certainly are forgetting about the poor, and I'm disappointed in that because I thought you might have changed your mind on it. But not necessarily, no, you haven't. On this famous train, we didn't get an invite for a jaunt on the train. People did who the train, I think, doesn't even pass through their patch. But I've got this here. It's nothing new. 1986, a leaflet was put out in Blythe talking about the train from Ashington to Blythe to Newcastle. We've had all kinds of governments since, so don't claim that it's because you've got a Tory government now. We had one for 18 years, and it never happened. And I feel as though I'm sitting on the train. I've heard that much about it over the years. I would like to ask the leader when we may see this train, because I was told it would happen in 2020. It didn't happen. I think, you know, I'll be pushing the daisies up before this train ever hits the tracks. I'm disappointed that the only thing you seem to be given to Blythe is a relief road, and like everything else, I'm not quite sure when the relief road will come. You've talked a lot about Ashington and Berwick and Hexham. What are you going to do for the town of Blythe, the largest town in South East Northumberland, and you haven't said what it is you intend to do there? Thank you, Chair.
Peter, do you want to take on that? Yeah, Councillor Grimshaw.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm not going to support your budget either, because getting back to the council tax support, I would just like to give you some figures, because yes, Councillor Oliver did suggest before that we had a freedom of information, which we've actually now received. And just give you some figures before anybody in this chamber thinks that they're going to vote and support this and see how it's going to affect your wards, communities and shopping centres, etc. The leader of the council's own ward has 21 people who will be affected. The deputy leader will have 27. 14,798 households are hit by the new Tory tax charge, and the vast majority in the southeast of Northumberland. Collection rates are predicted to fall from 99 to 83%. Can the leader of the council explain how does he expect to get blood out of a stone? At least 150 of the council's own staff will be hit by this. 7,679 single women are hit by the change. When do the Tories ditch their plans to have a county that works for everyone? 4,456 disabled people are hit by this charge. When did the Tories ditch their plans to save and have a county that works for everyone? Nonsense. 6,442 families with children are hit by the charge. When did the Tories ditch their plans to have the county that works for everyone? And I would just like to say that going back to the adult services section where we're asked why haven't we brought it forward about the people's comments, I'll tell you why. Because we're sitting here in the back benches, totally ignored, when the arena at the top can have party political broadcasts, and yet when we raise a valid point, we're shunned, shouted down, and said we've had plenty of questions. And this is the arena, if the shoe had been on the other foot, where you would have brought this up, not behind closed doors, because it's such a vital, disgusting cut. And have they taken into consideration when these people will be affected as well when the universal credit is rolled out, because it's going to affect these people even more, and it will affect the towns and the local economy, because if the people haven't got it, they can't spend it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Grimshaw. I mean, first of all, the point I'd make is that we have actually, as a council, already voted on this in the last council meeting. It wasn't something we introduced lightly, but I'd just like to point out that some of the things you're saying are just simply wildly inaccurate. You're saying 14,792 households.
One at a time, please.
14,792 households. It's actually 14,792 people, which is very different to households. So you're making a fundamental, sort of quite large-scale error there.
You're talking about collection rates falling from 99% to 83%. You're implying that collection rates across all council tax collection will fall from 99 to 83%. That is not true. We're using 99.3% for the existing council tax base, and we're using 83% for the new, the 14,000 people. So the aggregate change will not be nothing like a fall of from 99 to a fall of 16%. It'll be a tiny fraction of that. We've also benchmarked that against other local authorities in the North East. The only other local authority in the North East not to be asking people to make a contribution is Durham. Every other Labour-controlled council in the North East is already doing it. We will still be the most generous, other than Durham, when this is implemented in the next financial year. And the other point, which is one that we've debated already, is the fact that your party had plans to increase it by 50%, asking people to make a 50% contribution rather than an 8% contribution.
Okay, Councillor Ruffhead. No, you can't. That does not exist. I've been through all of the documents with the legal officer, and if you're named, it doesn't give you a right to speak. It doesn't. It doesn't. I've been through it. Councillor Ruffhead.
Thank you, Chair. Just please bear with me. I've got a few issues to go through. The first of all, obviously, Councillor Bridget's now gone. He mentioned the introduction of electronic planning applications for town and parish councils, and obviously this was an issue that was heavily discussed at our town and parish liaison working group, and I welcome the cabinet member, Councillor Sanderson, committed to work with the Northumberland NALC, not the National NALC, the Northumberland NALC Committee and the Northumberland SLCC as a partnership working group to actually bat out what concerns they've got to bring that back for discussion, and hopefully it's something that we can move forward with because it's technology and everybody's moving forward. And obviously there are concerns about rural areas, which hopefully that can be case-by-case situation. The next thing, obviously I welcome Councillor Jackson, the leader. His main word of all the towns in Northumberland was Berwick, 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 Berwick in his speech. And it's good to see, after decades of Berwick being the last frontier and the forgotten town of this county, actually getting some well overdue compensation for that. And he knows well that if he and his cabinet don't deliver, that the 3 Berwick members will be nipping at his heel and holding him to account. And it's part and parcel of my speech at the local area council as well. In general, I'm supportive of your budget because you're addressing the debt strategy. Had we continued on the previous path of the previous administration, perhaps by the time, like 40 years down the line, maybe most people in here might not be with us, but it would be me, Councillor Renner Thompson and Councillor Scott Dickinson who would kind of be left. Oh, and, well, other people. I was just being cross-party, and a few others, right? Would be sort of here to have to deal with a burden that the previous lot dealt us with. And one of my very first meetings on this council, I will never forget it. It seemed that some members were more concerned about biscuits being cut at committees rather than investing in frontline maintenance, which is absolutely appalling. We're not here on the gravy train for free handouts. If you want a packet of biscuits, go and buy them yourself. Don't come moaning to meetings that we're cancelling them. It's the budget. It's... Well, I listened... I was respectful and let you spoke, so please let me be respectful the same.
Right, just ignore. Right. Get on with it.
Right, and obviously... well, it wasn't me who wanted the biscuits, I can assure you. I'll buy you a packet after the meeting. Right, the next point. Well, let me speak, please, right?
Come on, it's getting late.
Well, right. And obviously, Councillor Pitcock sadly is no longer with us, and he was actually one of the few members who would actually, every time I called for a named vote, actually support me. And just to get in his favourite line, just somehow, if you're an evil Tory by wanting to actually invest in real council housing, then that's a badge of honour you should wear in Northumberland. But principally, I cannot vote for this budget on one thing, and I'm going to propose an amendment, and I'm sure everybody will agree with it, and I look forward to us having to go through another named vote. If we turn to page 282, there's a mention of the money laundering officer, and it's still down as a former chief executive. I don't know if that's some sick ironic joke for previous members of 2017 before we got on, because that's just a stark reminder of the appalling governance of having your chief executive being your sort of chief finance officer. And I'm glad that this administration separated the roles. So I propose that amendment.
That's an administrative error.
So we'll take that amendment as part of the substantive proposal.
What question? Yes.
As a proposer, I can take that as part of the substantive proposal.
I did, Grant. That's why I'm going to ignore you. Councillor Jackson, do you want to go sum up?
I'm going to accept the amendment as part of the
Right.
proposal.
We'll go to the vote.
We don't need to vote on
Hmm?
it.
Do you want to speak? Come on then. Yeah, I didn't have anybody else on the list. Liz Dunn put her hand up, but it was Peter Jackson had stood up. So keep going.
Thank you. Right, okay, I'm not quite sure where to start really. First of all, I want to make a few points generally, and one of those is about the Ashington, Blythe and Tyne line, or whatever people want to call it. And I think some of the things that have been said in this chamber today have been really disingenuous, because one of the things I learned when I became a councillor is that we do lots of things, we set lots of things in motion that we might not be the ones who are in control or alive indeed by the time those things come to fruition. But actually we play a part in that. And so for the leader of the council to stand and say nothing was done is an out and out lie. And he knows that, because he knows that for years we have campaigned cross-party, and I thought this was a cross-party issue actually. We've campaigned cross-party, and the last administration actually finally had the opportunity to put that campaigning into plans. And a lot of the things you are now working on are plans that we started. And to not acknowledge that is really, I think, below the belt, leader. The other thing, and it has been raised by other members so far, is when you talk about lack of investment. And I think you do need to look at the areas where there's been historic lack of investment. And those areas were not controlled by the Labour Party historically. The medium-term financial plan is not dissimilar from what our medium-term the capital plan is not dissimilar from our capital plan when we were in control, or would have been now. And a lot of the things that are in there, again, are things that we started working on and started planning for, like a new leisure centre in Morpeth, like the things in Ponteland. So again, actually, don't try and score points for no purpose. This is a lot of this, and when you leave office in 2 years' time, you know, we will pick up where you left off, okay?
I'll pick up where I left off.
Possibly in your dreams, Jeff, but never mind. I think there are things that have been added at the last minute to this programme, and there are things in this budget that are quite blatantly gerrymandering. They are quite blatantly about investment being put into Conservative constituencies at the expense of the wider county. And there was things that have just suddenly appeared today. I have been struggling to get further information on the local transport plan, which I think on close examination, and it was put before us very late in the day, is weighted considerably towards the more rural areas of the county. And I don't dispute that for years they have needed investment in roads. But I would suggest that a lot of that is about the squeezing of local government funding. And I'm talking about before we were in control even. I'm talking about the last Conservative government that absolutely squeezed the life out of the ability to maintain the infrastructure in this country. And I suppose my final point, and I will not be supporting this budget, obviously, And it's to pick up where Councillor Reid spoke, and I hope that this time he's actually going to put his words into actions on this occasion. But this is a budget that asks people to pay for more and to get less, and is disproportionately unfair to those in our community who need our support the most.
Councillor Dunn. And then Councillor Foster. It's coming.
Thank you, Chair. I won't be supporting this budget, obviously, but I do welcome Mr Jackson's comments that he's committed to making Northumberland a great place to live and bring up a family, and particularly its reference to George Bay and what a jewel in the crown it is. I would just like to seek assurance that that would apply to the whole county, because I don't know if you saw the recent Tyne Tees coverage of Linemouth Bay and what a terrible state it's in, with waste and pollution that's actually endangering both land and sea. All this council would commit to at the time is to maintain or monitor that situation. Now, that remedy won't do anything for George Bay, it does nothing for my constituents, and it won't improve anything. It certainly won't make my area a better place to live in and bring up a family. So I do hope that if this is the intention, that it goes right across the county and everything is looked at. Thank you.
Councillor Foster. Can we hand the microphone? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I think before I get to my main point, I just want to go back to the speeches at the very beginning. We're not going to look back, and we're not going to blame others. I think it lasted for 5 seconds because your speech was full of looking back and blaming others. But anyway, on to my points. I represent the Stakeford electoral division, which is between Ashington and Bedlington. We have the Ashington Hall. Now you're saying a cinema. We've got one in Cramlington, which is underutilised, as I've been informed. And my worry is that you're going to be able to secure a cinema that would actually invest in an area which is close to another area which the cinema is underperforming. And I haven't got the facts to back that up, but that is what I've been told. So I mentioned that with regards to the Bedlington Hall, where you started work on the groundworks recently, raising the hopes of the people in the town of Bedlington, to then suddenly down tools, everybody was off site, and everyone in Bedlington was wondering what was going on, and you can't secure your anchor business for that to go forward. Now you're saying you're going to deliver in Bedlington. What assurances do the people of Bedlington and the surrounding areas have that that's going to happen when you can't get that anchor tenant? And if you can't get the anchor tenant for Bedlington, what assurances have we got that you're going to get that anchor cinema for Ashington? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I've got Councillor Dickinson.
Not wanting to reference the jewel in George Bay Crown, but I shall. Just in terms of clarification, and obviously Councillor Bourne referred to my jewel in the crown photograph earlier. I haven't read the paper today because we've been somewhat busy, but I'll have a look later. In terms of a clarification for Councillor Oliver, 14,798 households. Unless there's something hidden in here, you only pay council tax once. So yes, that is individuals, but only per household, because you only pay council tax once, unless you've added in that people are going to start paying twice. The other thing is, nowhere in here does it mention in the capital spend around Bedlington Town, and we've heard a lot in here today about that. If somebody could draw my attention to the budget line in the capital spend around Bedlington Town, I'm more than happy to be corrected. The other things, I would just echo what Councillor Dungworth and others have said around this budget and the people who will be hit the most. Councillor Foster somewhat stole the thunder around the leader's budget, around not looking back and the council for the future. And it did last, I think actually it was 4 seconds, not 5, when everything in the budget speech for the future referred to the past. But There we are. So I won't be voting for this budget today on the basis that it doesn't protect vulnerable people and it actually targets them. And that's one of the reasons why I will not be voting for it today.
All right, Councillor Flux.
Thank you, Chair. I really enjoy being a Deputy Business Chair, but it doesn't give me a great deal of opportunity to speak in this chamber. But I have to say, the talking down of Cramlington earlier, that I have no facts to back that up on our cinema. I really enjoy our cinema, and I know residents of my town enjoy my cinema, and I really resent hearsay and conjecture about whether something's succeeding or not succeeding. And I think if people are going to come into this chamber and make statements, please at least come with some evidence to back up what you are saying rather than conjecture.
Councillor Wearmouth, and then I'll go to Councillor Heppel, and I want to go to the vote after that. You've had enough.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and catch a few of those. It is great that we all support what will be the Northumberland line when it returns. And I'm sorry, we did say cross-party support. Of course, I forget Councillor Reid, who doesn't support it in the slightest, because he doesn't, and possibly never has done, I don't know. As you'll see in some of the papers, hopefully, it's a two-phase approach. We're hoping to return services, I think it's 2022, and there's a programme of feasibility studies going through the course of this year, and towards the end of this year, as Chris Grayling mentioned when he came on his visit, we'll have the opportunity to secure funding from Transforming Cities Fund and other sources as well. So I hope that answers that question on 2022, but I'll get some information either to the Blythe Forum or through some other means, Councillor Campbell. Happy to do that. When it comes to Ashington and Bedlington, I don't want to be too political about this, but we do need to stop talking places down. And I'm going to get, I will get a bit political about this. The chairman of the National Labour Party, my God, he couldn't wait to cry those crocodile tears when it came to Bedlington. He knows fine well, because we said in our press statement that we had a short pause and we'll be going on very soon. And that's exactly what we'll be doing. And you'll see more information on that in the coming weeks. When it comes to Ashington and to Cramlington and this question of cinemas, we've actually had a number of people who are very happy to set up a cinema in Ashington. They've been delighted. And there's lots of retailers who are delighted to go there as well. People from the private sector, because we have a faith in Ashington that you don't need to move this building a handful of miles along the road and pretend that it's regeneration when it's not. Because the private sector is ready and willing to come in. And you'll see that very, very soon. And in terms of this point on Cramlington and how the cinema actually performs there, it's actually one of the better performing cinemas for view. And I'll have that confirmed to you from advance if that's what you want. I think there was another question on funding and where the item was from Councillor Dickinson, and I think that you'll find that that's within the advance budget, and it's not broken down in this budget. It's been provided for previously, and it is there.
Right, well, rapidly heading towards 6 o'clock when I have to pass a motion to carry on. I've got Councillor Heppel. But I'm desperately want to get the business...
Be very quick, Chair.
Yes, quick, thank you.
It's on Cramlington. I've lived there for nearly 40 years and I'm proud to live there. But in terms of the view, a couple of things, right? They've just reduced the prices, half the prices for going to the cinema there. Now that's to attract people. So there's obviously an issue with view. I was there with my granddaughter a couple of weeks ago, and there was, apart from us two, there's only the two other people in that cinema. Friends of mine have been, and they were the only two there. So there is clearly a problem with the view, despite what you say.
Right. Councillor Foster, you've already spoken. Councillor, I'll
speak about me. I won't respond.
Councillor Gorman hasn't spoken. Okay, use a microphone, Jeff, please.
It's a comment you made before. I don't think I need a microphone. It's a comment you made before.
You said you've read all the books on protocol. Can I ask what legal beagle if you've missed one? I was always under the understanding that if you are a named councillor, you're entitled to vote, to reply to that. Can I ask the legal beagle for his on that, please?
It may be, Councillor Goban, it may be a matter of custom and practice, but nowhere within the Council's constitution is a member allowed to exercise a right of reply because they've been named. It's an issue, I think, which we'll probably take up within the Constitution Working Group when we're reviewing the Constitution to see what the members of that group think in terms of making recommendations for its continued use during council meetings and indeed other meetings.
Councillor Foster, briefly.
Thank you, Chair. I do appreciate that. I just want to reiterate to Councillor Flux, no way dissing Cramlington. I like Cramlington. I go shopping in Cramlington. It's a nice place. But when I go with my friends to the cinema and there's only a handful of people in there, that does speak volumes. And if I can just respond to the points with regards to Ashington, Bedlington, can I say thank you very much for the information, and I really do hope that this transpires very, very quickly.
Right, final two, Councillor Gallagher and Councillor Robinson. And I'm going for the vote, and that's it, because otherwise I'll run out of time. Come on, quick.
Quick. Thank you very much. Councillor Wearmouth, I would just like to remind you, I'm an Ashington Town Councillor, I'm an Ashington County Councillor, and I'm very, very proud of my town. I never ever pull it down on numerous meetings that we've had. A bit concerned, and we need a little bit more clarity about the two-phase direction of the rail. And I want to thank you very much, because you're the only Tory councillor that said when that rail comes. Everybody else said if. You're the only one that said when. So thank you very much for that.
Hang on, let him speak.
I also want to remind you, I've always, at the very beginning, had concerns about the cinema in Ashington. You put a survey out of 412 people, 200 of those being school pupils. And ironically, it was done on a Saturday when people were visiting our town. So I'm not sure if we got all Ashingtonians' views. We picked that up as an Ashington Town Council, paid a vast amount of money to get a survey to see the direction of what residents wanted in the town. And can I just tell you, cinema wasn't at the top. It was a very close to a public toilet on the main street. So our suggestions are, and I'll say them again now in full council, the cinema, a public arena, a theatre and a music hall, all rolled in one, and the push for nighttime economy is very much welcome. The retail, the interest in retail in Ashington is fantastic, and there's a lot of talk. We've spoken for 2 years, and all we keep saying is please, please, please come with something. And once again, I just believe this is going to be another token shop. Please, please tell me I'm wrong.
Okay, Councillor Robinson.
Just to respond to two members who asked about the Bedlington Town Regeneration Programme, of course that was the first question we asked when we first looked at your budget, and we were assured it's there. We were shown where it is. So don't worry about us. We'll look after Bedlington. Look after you and water.
Right. Okay.
Just to sum up, councillors, you know, a lot of this is actually a cross-party programme, but we're actually making it happen, and that's what I'm saying is the difference. There has been a lot of talk about a lot of these projects for a lot of years, but there is a way to get them happen. And I know a lot of people will always be naysayers. A lot of people will say, oh, these are dreams, but we're actually starting to prove that we can deliver these projects, and they'll make a big difference right across Northumberland. So we will do what we say, and we've already got a track record even in the last year and a half on that. I do commend all of the proposals on block to the council. There are two amendments. We have the amendment from Councillor Roughhead of the wording in page 282, I think I remember. And also there's been an amendment to the long-term capital medium plan, which has been circulated to all councillors. which includes an addition for Berwick Swan Centre and this major new project of a new Berwick education campus for that town, which is so much needed. So with those amendments, I'm very happy to propose the whole list of proposals. Thank you.
That was seconded by Councillor Oliver. Right. Grant, if you want a name vote, you needn't bother because it has to be. It has to be. It has to be. I know. I'm ahead of you. Right. Do you want to start?
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Baughan. Councillor Bennon. Councillor Campbell. Councillor Carty. Councillor Castle. Councillor Sesford. Councillor Clark. Councillor Crosby. Councillor Daly. Councillor Grant Davy.
Are you sure?
Councillor Susan Davy. Councillor Dickinson. Councillor Dodd.
4.
Councillor Dunbar. Councillor Dungworth. Councillor Dunn. Councillor Flux.
4.
Councillor Foster. Councillor Gallagher. Councillor Gibson. Councillor Gobin. Councillor Grimshaw. Councillor Happel. Councillor Hill. Councillor Homer. Councillor Horncastle. Councillor Hutchison. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Jones. Councillor Kennedy. Councillor Lang. Councillor Laurie. Councillor Ledger. Councillor Moore. Councillor Murray. Councillor Nesbitt. Councillor Oliver. Councillor Parry. Councillor Patson. Councillor Purvis. Councillor Quinn. Councillor Reid. Councillor Renner Thompson. Councillor Rickerby. Councillor Riddle. Councillor Robinson. Councillor Roughhead. Councillor Sanderson. Councillor Seymour. Councillor Sharp. Councillor Simpson. Councillor Stewart. Councillor Stowe. Councillor Swinburne. Councillor Swithenbank. Councillor Thorne. Councillor Towns. Councillor Watson. Councillor Wearmouth. Councillor Webb. And finally Councillor Wilson. Thank you, members.
Well, to tot up, when the new leadership of the Labour Party becomes elected, please note that there are rules and regs on the budget, and you really do have a genuine offer to go through any alternative budget with an officer to make sure it would add up, etc. So the offer is there and it's on record, so please come forward next year and do that. Shooting season.
438 against 22 and 2 abstentions. There's another item to go.
There's another item to vote on, so I'll be quick as I can. 38 for, 22 against, and 2 abstentions. Yeah. So the budget is carried. Item 2, council tax. Can we agree this? I need a name vote, I'm afraid. I'm afraid I do. Grant's read the rules.
It is actually enshrined in legislation now, members, that we need a name vote in relation to that, so I'll be as quick as I can. Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Baughan. He's not. Thank you. Councillor Bennon. Councillor Bridget. Not here. Councillor Campbell. Councillor Campbell. Pardon. Councillor Carty. Councillor Castle. Councillor Sesford. Councillor Clark. Councillor Crosby. Councillor Dale. Not here. Councillor Daly. Councillor Davy. Grant Davy. Councillor Susan Davy. Councillor Dickinson. Councillor Dodd.
4.
Councillor Dunbar. Councillor Dungworth. Councillor Dunn. Councillor Flux. Councillor Foster. Councillor Gallagher. Councillor Gibson. Councillor Gobin. Councillor Grimshaw. Councillor Happel. Councillor Hill. Councillor Homer. Councillor Horncastle, Councillor Hutchison, Councillor Jackson, Councillor Jones, Councillor Kennedy, Councillor Lang, Councillor Laurie, Councillor Ledger, Councillor Moore, Councillor Murray, Councillor Nesbitt, Councillor Oliver, Councillor Parry, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Purvis, Councillor Quinn, Councillor Reid, Councillor Renner Thompson, Councillor Richards, not here, Councillor Rickerby, Councillor Riddle, Councillor Robinson, Councillor Roughhead, Councillor Sanderson, Councillor Seymour, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Simpson, Councillor Stewart, Councillor Stowe, Councillor Swinburne, Councillor Swithenbank, Councillor Thorne, Councillor Towns, Councillor Watson, Councillor Wearmouth, Councillor Webb, and Councillor Wilson. Thank you, members.
Just hold it a second, we'll be quick. You mean Gordon, the battle started already for the leadership, has it? Are you coming down to the sun, Grant?
Chairman, 39 for, 22 against.
The result is 39 for, 22 against. Item 11, annual timetable of meetings 2019 to 20. Can we agree that? Yeah. Thank you. Hang on. Well, oh, got it.